Excuse me, can I
all
video?
citizens, young and elderly, and those who may have health restrictions such as mobility or lack of strength. One can put as little or as much garbage in a garbage bag as they can lift and place into the dumpster. As one resident put it, it is easy to carry a bag to a dumpster than roll out a heavy, awkward bin. You pride yourselves in listening to the citizens of this city. Have you considered that the seniors and the majority of those mentioned above are very concerned in how they can roll out a bin, regardless of whether it be curbside or alley pickup, when we have snow and ice conditions, often for a minimum of 7 months per year, and this year from October to presently right now, April 8th. The weight of the bin itself, let alone the extra weight from the garbage, to a maximum of 75 pounds is unmanageable for many people. This is compounded by having to move the bin through the snow and ice. People are concerned that the city is taking away their independence from them by implementing the roll-out bins, which could force them to leave their homes because they are unable to deal with the proposed method of roll-out garbage disposal. I personally have been unable to maneuver a roll-out bin at both my children's residences in St. Albert and Lethbridge because of the awkwardness and weight issues. And Lethbridge does not have the snow and ice problems that we do here. Roll-outs are known to blow over in the wind, and they tend to tip over following dumping, after which they are difficult to set upright. Number 3, storage of bins. There are many residences in Lacombe where the storage of roll-out bins is not practical and may not be possible, in particular townhouse units that are joined together. For example, the 4 townhouse units on 52nd Avenue between 50th Street and 51st Street. The residents there use the back alley dumpster to the east of them. They have no direct access to a back alley. The 2 inside units do not have backyard access, nor do they have room in the front of their units to store not just one bin for garbage, but another for recycle, and possibly in the future for compost material, as is in the case in St. Albert. What are these people to do? The only practical solution for these units is retaining the dumpster-style disposal system with a back alley recyclable dumpster and a compost system. Number 4, unsightliness. As per bylaw 316, section 15 states that bins shall be stored within the property in such a manner so as not to be unsightly in appearance. Regardless of whether it is front or backyard storage, these bins are unsightly, smelly, and should the pickup become bi-weekly, it will be worse. Look at the areas that currently have roll-out bins in what we are told is the most beautiful city in Alberta. They add nothing to the decor of a residence. If we add roll-out bins to every residence in the city, we will soon not have that reputation, and this will be done needlessly. If we pride ourselves in having this reputation, why would we detract from the visual appearances of residences as well as their marketability when we have back alleys in much of Lacombe with functional alley dumpsters? Number 5, practicality. There are areas in the city where the system of curbside roll-out bins are not practical. Areas where the snow has been piled to one side of the street and left on boulevards, and where residences have no front driveway, example 51st Street between 51st Avenue and 54th Avenue. It would be impossible for people to drag a roll-out bin to curbside over the mound of snow left by the city because they would have no direct access to the street. The arterial road of 54th Avenue between 58th Street and 56th Street has a high volume traffic with snow piled to the north of the street, which means that the roll-out bins would need to be placed in the traffic lane for pickup. The original Woodland Drive west of C&E Trail has so many vehicles on a narrow street that it would be very difficult for a big garbage truck to pick up bins, and there are many more areas too numerous to mention. Safety. There are many streets in the city where it would be unsafe for curbside roll-out bins, namely 50th Ave, being the main artery in the city, has very high traffic volume. How safe would it be for a garbage truck to be darting in and out, stopping and starting when there's so much traffic to contend with? 50th Street between 50th Ave and all the way past the elementary schools. Traffic is very high, as it is again the main artery road to the north end of the city. Unsafe for the same reasons as well as for the young student pedestrian traffic. And all of 54th Avenue from 58th Street to Highway 2A. Again, very high traffic volume, as well as playground and school zones. And there are many others too numerous to mention. According to Matthew Gowdy's consideration for amendment to bylaw 316 prepared on April 8, 2013, there are only 4 alternatives to be considered by council in the methods of garbage disposal. A, curbside rollout pickup. B, rear lane rollout pickup. C, a combination of curbside and rear lane rollout pickup. D, or a cancellation or modification of the rollout bin pilot program. There is a 5th possible solution to the garbage issue. There could be a combination of retaining the current back alley dumpsters and instituting rollouts for those areas where it would be more practical to do so. So, in essence, we as citizens who have back alleys and back alley dumpsters do not want them gone. Secondly, the people that I've talked to do not want the Wolf Creek Recycle Depot closed, regardless of any additional recycling system proposed by the city. They do not want to deal with rollout bins for that purpose. As one citizen said as follows, garbage is garbage, and people must have a way of disposal that works for them. Otherwise, it'll be found, dumped by the side of the road, or left in yards for neighbors to have to look at and smell. County residents have expressed concern that they will find garbage in their ditches as they did prior to our dumpster years. To reiterate, we do not want curbside rollout bin pickups where there are currently back alley dumpsters available, nor do we want back alley rollouts where they would be picked up, where there are currently community dumpsters for that purpose. The solid waste roadmap indicates that the city has had input by only 2% of Lacombe's population. We contend that this is not a sufficient number of people and that further input should be sought, perhaps by way of a plebiscite in October 2013 during the municipal elections. This should only be done after adequate public consultation and information provided in various formats to citizens. Perhaps a public meeting would be one suitable format. Most of the people I've spoken to were not aware of the proposed new system, but were very upset to learn they were going to lose their dumpsters. We feel that the city has done an inadequate job of communicating to its citizens with regard to the solid waste roadmap proposal, and that council needs to revisit this issue, taking into account all of the feedback they have received, which we have been told has been overwhelming. In closing, we have some suggestions that we were not able to bring forward due to the length of time given to present. This will be given to you in printed form along with a copy of this presentation. In addition, I've included a picture taken last week of a Lethbridge Street on garbage day. You will notice that many lids of these rollouts are open to the elements following dumping. We as citizens of the city of Lacombe request a recorded vote from this day forward, April 8, 2013, on any issues and or decisions with respect to solid waste management roadmap proposal. We are aware that amendments can be changed at any time, such as is being done at this meeting. And you'll receive a copy of this as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to thank the concerned citizens who took the time to give me their input and showing up here tonight, as well as expressing their views directly to council members and city administration. Nothing is ever a done deal. We as citizens have the right and the power to express our concerns and have them heard. Changes can be made, and that is evident that that is starting to happen today. I thank you all. And I want to thank council and administration who have communicated to us both by telephone and email. I'm sure your workloads have been very busy. Thank you. Margaret will hand these out to you. Is that appropriate at this time, or do you want that done at a different time?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Sure, just sitting around here. Thank you.
That's why I brought my ministers. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Louise and Margaret, for coming forward this morning and speaking on behalf of the group here. We appreciate that. We have a couple more presentations, then we will move right into that discussion. That notice of motion brought forward by Councillor Connick right after these other two presentations. Thank you very, very much. And as we're just getting this information handed out to us, I would ask that Lees and Associates come on up to the front desk there and get ready for their presentation. Thank you.
This was always
Thank you, Margaret. Next presentation, Lees and Associates, and I'd ask Director Vaughn to introduce them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So this evening, Council will receive a presentation from Eric Lees and Chris McBride, who are with Eric Lees and Associates. And as Council will be aware, we have entered into a contract with this organization in order to conduct a master plan for our cemetery lands expansion. And I'll just let Council know that to this point in time, we've had a few working meetings by phone with Eric and Chris and some of other members of their team. And today represents their first opportunity to come to the city, and we actually had a site tour and spent some time on the land, as well as they have been meeting with community groups and stakeholders to obtain information and in order to make the project wholly successful. And so with that, I will introduce Eric and Chris and look forward to their presentation.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, delighted to talk to you about cemeteries. When we came through the door, I thought everybody had come to talk about cemeteries. It's wonderful.
Eventually we'll all be.
Eventually we all will be. One technical question, how do I advance the slides?
pass this mouse on down to you.
Thank you.
You should have the,
What's it?
yeah, that's right. Welcome, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Eric Lees. I'm here with Chris McBride. We are members of the firm Lees and Associates, Landscape Architects and Cemetery Planners. This evening's presentation will only take 10 or 15 minutes, and if you'll allow me, I'll move through that and we can have questions afterwards. Our firm was founded in 1998 after I spent 20 years on your side of the table, actually, in parks and recreation and cemetery planning, administration and management. Our firm concentrates on services to the public sector and organizations such as yours in pretty much all aspects of cemetery planning, management, administration, operating procedures, bylaws, and so on. We work from 2 offices, primarily in Vancouver, but also in Toronto. Our work is across Canada and increasingly in Africa. I am the principal. As I mentioned, I was in Parks and Recreation for many years, dating back almost 35 now. As a cemetery planner and landscape architect, this is an area of practice that I find both personally interesting, but also brings a whole lot of meaning to myself, Chris, and other members of our team. And so we're delighted to be working here with you in the city of Lacombe, as we have been fortunate to work in many different communities in Alberta, including some of your neighbors. This process that we've been engaged to work on your behalf is essentially a 9-step process, and we're just entering sort of the first, second stage here now. We've already begun with some of our background data review, beginning to understand the demographics in your community, how your community is growing and changing. Ultimately, the number of people that die is a direct result of the number of people that live here. And so trying to get a sense of exactly what those demographics are, working with your staff, and today on site, our work has begun in earnest. The goal here is to bring forward 2 different options for a master plan concept within the next 6 to 8 weeks, and ultimately do the detailed design, construction drawings, and break ground on some new cemetery expansion lands later this year. Part of the reason for this project, really the main driving reason for this project, Mr. Mayor, is that you're running out of space, and new space is required, and we want to be sure that both in the short and the long term, Lacombe residents have sufficient room for both interment and memorialization. So that means both for traditional burials, ground burials, as well as for the interment and honoring those who have chosen cremation. So your existing land is reaching capacity, and we now need to go into those lands that have been designated for cemetery purposes across the main access road into the lands that have been used for ball diamonds for some time. So that's going to be the primary area of our inquiry, although we are looking at other ways of optimizing, if not maximizing, the land that is presently used and of which you're familiar with now as your cemetery. There is a trail system that runs through nearby the cemetery, and we will be doing whatever we can to ensure that kind of activity continues to occur there. As I say, phase 1 of the development will occur later this year or in early 2014. So for those of you not intimately familiar with the cemetery, it may have been a while since you've been out there. The large green block on the left is the existing land, and the white shaded area is the new expansion area. There are multiple opportunities here for enhancing interment and memorialization. You already have your birthplace forest in the southwest corner of the cemetery. There's a small existing facility there for storage and bulk materials. There's in general a pretty good woodland buffer on the north side, and to a certain extent on the west side as well. There is a strong field of honor. We met this afternoon with a representative from the Legion, who is of course eager to be sure that we find and sustain additional capacity for veterans of Canadian veterans living in Lacombe that want to be buried there. The cemetery entrance is somewhat nondescript. You can drive by pretty quickly, as we almost did today. So those are some of the things, some of the specific areas that we'll be looking at. Primarily, however, Mayor and Council, the purpose of today's presentation is to both give you a summary, introduce ourselves, but to also sort of whet your appetite for what we'll be exploring and coming up with in the coming days and weeks as we develop these two options. And so what we've included here is a series of slides that look at some of the design trends and precedents for cemeteries that we think would be useful and will help instruct us in developing ideas of an appropriate nature here for Lacombe. So in this particular slide, we're talking about taking cues from the landscape. It's a beautiful, this type of landscape is a beautiful one. It's not one that we want to necessarily wholesale change, but we want to augment and work with landform, plants and trees and memorialization options that enhance it, not simply redo it. The edges are incredibly important. As I mentioned, you've got some strong edges now, you've got some strong interior boundaries which should be enhanced, and there's some additional opportunities for creating spaces and gateways in the cemetery. Important to emphasize as well that the seasons do change, believe it or not. The spring is coming, and some crocus will likely bloom, but the other seasons of the year are equally as engaging, and of course people die throughout the year, every week, every day of the year, and so the memory and connection to landscape, time and space is something that is really important for us to keep in mind as we're designing the cemetery. One of the trends, albeit on the outside horizon, is towards green burial. We can talk more about that later if you wish, but we think it's important to keep these kind of interment options, stay aware of them at least, and to gauge the point of view of yourselves and members of the community as we develop the plans, so that the full range of interment and memorialization options are explored. Now maybe green burial isn't exactly what you had in mind for this site, and I haven't quite come to that. We haven't come to that place either, but maybe as other lands that are under the stewardship or ownership of the city or even the county could be used for green burial purposes. So of course traditional casket burial is something that there's approximately 30 to 40 burials that occur there, both single depth at 6 feet as well as double depth a little bit deeper every year. Another 10 or 20 are sold, so we need a capacity for approximately 50 to 60 grave sales a year for traditional burial. That's for a plot that's 4 feet by 12 feet. But with the advent of cremation, of course, we need to be sure that there's sufficient capacity for the interment of cremated remains as well. And although many people choose to scatter out at the lake or at another place of personal significance or meaning, anywhere from 30 to 50% of Lacombe residents are choosing to bring their remains to the Lacombe Cemetery. And this is actually higher than average. 20% is usually about the maximum amount. So Lacombe residents are, I think, are to be commended for the fact that cremated remains are brought to the cemetery, and a place of memorialization is created for those that are choosing cremated remains. Columbaria are one form of interment of cremated remains. These are walls into which niches are built, and each niche can accommodate usually two, sometimes only one urn that contains one set of cremated remains. So the upper left is a series of columbaria walls. They're are already to Columbia at the cemetery. They've been received fairly well, and as time goes by, additional enhancements to that area will be proposed. We're also showing a variety of horticultural and water features and amenities, some of which may or may not be appropriate for Lacombe, but these are the kind of things that we'll be exploring. We wanted to just show you today, including different ways that cremated remains for families and for the community can be interred, in this case in family vessels, in the two slides on the left, and then traditional, if you will, traditional in-ground burial of cremated remains, which is still the most popular way of bringing cremated remains to a cemetery. It's our understanding that most people in Lacombe have not chosen to bury infants in an infant garden. We include this slide nonetheless because it's something that we think should be considered, and this kind of landscape treatment for scattering also works quite well. And here are some additional examples. Usually scattering is not necessarily scattering of all the remains. Some of the remains are scattered and then the remainder are actually buried in the ground, usually with some form of horticultural ground cover or shrub cover over, although oftentimes there are native plants that are incorporated into that, sometimes even habitat into scattering gardens as well. Memorialization, especially in light of the trend towards cremation, is something that we spend a lot of time on. And here are just a few examples of memorial walls, and sometimes for veterans, but not always shown this way. So there are multiple ways in media to accommodate memorialization. And one of the things that we're finding is that even though people just choose to cremate, they are now coming back to the cemetery looking for a place to also memorialize, even though the remains may be scattered at someplace other than the cemetery. So interment and memorialization don't necessarily have to go hand in hand. And then there's also the whole notion of cemeteries as places of contemplation and reflection, and that's what water is particularly good for, both its soothing and its life-giving characteristics. Sometimes more formal settings, like you might see for a field of honor or a place for memorializing fallen heroes in our community, as well as for those of us simply attending a cemetery as an individual or with one or two other people. So these gathering places have to work both ceremonially and as places of reflection, and that's some of the ideas, some of the programming that we would intend to work into the options that we'll be bringing forward. Some of the additional amenities, as I mentioned, water being one, framing some of the lovely views and trees that are in the cemetery are others. And of course, art, historically a place of cemeteries are historically a place where public art, sculpture, both permanent and ephemeral, both two-dimensional, three-dimensional, and even on a ceremonial or community performance basis. The slide in the lower left is from the Night for All Souls, which is held in the last Saturday of October. Historically, of course, very close to Halloween, but also very close to the Day of the Dead, Central American and Spanish way of recognizing the passing of loved ones, and just recently the Qingming Festival in Asia. So there are historically in many cultures, not just those of New Canadians, but even in our own cultures, visiting cemeteries as a group, caring for the grave, remembering is what these places are all about. And so art is a very helpful and eloquent way of helping us understand and make meaning of cemeteries. So with that, Mayor and Council, that sums up my presentation.
Thank you very much. Lee and Chris.
Eric.
Thank you. Eric, sorry. Questions, Council? Councilor Repple, then Councilor Creasy, then Councilor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Could you just expand on green burials? I'm not familiar really with what they're all involved.
Yes, Mayor, through the Councilor. Green burial typically includes 2 or more of the following components, usually not embalming. Usually a very simple casket, a wood casket or a shroud. No vault because of the embodied energy in concrete vaults. Usually some aspect of habitat enhancement or native planting, and typically a very discreet memorialization. So not always a headstone. If memorialization does occur, it's typically on a communal stone. You may have seen one or two of them there where multiple names are shown on one stone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Creasy.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Couple of things, gentlemen. First off, seems like a very large municipal reserve, about a third of the area, 5 acres and thereabouts. Was that an area that you were given to work with, or is this something that you've come up with?
That was an area we were given.
Okay. I guess I'll leave that question to administration and for later. Do you have any examples of other communities that have incorporated walking paths or bike paths through their cemeteries?
Multiple, Mr. Mayor, Council, there are multiple examples of that. Although I must say that I think we were both really impressed with the extent to which recreation and community use of the cemetery goes beyond the act of burial and memorialization. There, the paths that go through it, the little playground, the fact that the ball diamonds have existed so well there for so long, and the fact that so many people stroll and walk there and use it as a park is really gratifying for us to see, because we oftentimes will recommend trails and this type of multiple use of cemeteries. Here you're doing it, and that's good to see. But there are many examples of trails, even greenways through cemeteries.
Thank you, and they've been successful. It just was pointed out to me that it could be an issue for vandalism and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering if other communities have been successful with incorporating the two.
Yeah, Mayor, they have been, and the whole idea of having good people doing good things in the cemetery drives the bad guys out. So that's a classic way of crime prevention through environmental design.
So I guess I can pose my first question to administration then. Seems like it's a really substantial amount of area for a municipal reserve. I'm just curious what's the thoughts behind that.
So to Councillor Creasy, if I understand your question, the land that will be cemetery land is 9.78 acres, and then there's a small MR to the east of that. Is that what you're asking?
Well, it's not small, it's 5 acres, it's half the size of the cemetery.
The MR.
Correct.
And so that would have resulted when the subdivision was done, and perhaps Michael can speak to that. I think it had something to do with the fact that I'll let Michael talk to that.
Dr. Mitchell.
So the MR that is currently there is the result of subdivisions to the north. There were MR dedication requirements for the original co-op mall, and so these areas were consolidated into one MRs when the cemetery lands were restored back to appropriate designations. So that's the equivalent of 10% for that immediate area, not just including the cemetery lands themselves.
Okay, thank you. And is there any room to perhaps relocate some of that MR to an alternate area? I guess the reason why I asked that is a third of the area is substantial, and we're going through this whole exercise because of the lack of space. So that's the reason why we're going forward.
Well, anything's possible. Certainly that's a disposition of MR, and going back to the original, and this was reviewed back in 2009, 2008, there was concerns from neighbors that the original MR was compromised in the first place, and that at that time council ensured that the 10% requirement was restored as part of the overall plan. But again, that's council discretion in terms of how much MR is there. We would have to go through a normal disposition request and subdivision again.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster, then Councillor Bosma.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Eric, thank you very much for the presentation. It was awesome. I know we certainly had lots of discussion prior to engaging you as to the pros and cons of doing something like this. And I guess my first question is, how soon is your open house consultations going to take place? I didn't see a specific time frame there, I don't think.
Mayor, through to Councillor Foster, our hope is that we can be back in the community for an open house by early June. But we want to work closely with staff to ensure that we're setting up those open houses at a time that's convenient for people.
Thank you. As you can tell, we have a very engaged public here this evening, and I would encourage you to have their email or phone numbers before they leave. Thank you.
Or at the very least, contract Margaret and Louise to do your public consultation process for you. Councillor Bosma.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I would like to know, in your opinion, based on, I'm sure, some preliminary research, the 9.78 acres that is being designated for future expansion of our cemetery, how long do you think that would last, based on our current and historical growth?
Mayor, through the councillor, that's the $1 million question in our business right now, because of the trend towards cremation, which of course is much less land consumptive than traditional burial. Having said that, we don't anticipate cremation to go through the roof here as it is elsewhere in, say, BC, for example. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. So we will be basing our projections on essentially the historic land consumption and the number of burials that Lacombe has needed over the last 10 years. And with those in mind, I think we're figuring in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 years. Have I got that right, Chris? Even maybe a bit more than that. However, I caution council that although that sounds like a long time, your successors don't necessarily want to be faced with trying to find cemetery land in that 49th year. So as land becomes available that would be suitable for the long-term cemetery land use purpose, I would encourage you to keep your eyes open for it.
So further to that, it's probably safe to say that our municipal reserve that we have designated, we don't have to worry about that in our term as councillors. 45 years from now, when we have to seriously think about the cemetery expansion, we might consider it at that time. So thanks so much.
Councillor Kate.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Eric, I just wanted to comment on your presentation because I walk through the cemetery quite often, and I see many other people in the community do the same. And I'm very appreciative of the trails that are around there right now. And I have never seen cemetery plans before, and so this was something new to me, but I just wanted to thank you for it because it gives the idea how we can celebrate life after life has ended. And I think that's wonderful that we can have that in our community. And what you talked about remembering, I think that that's what the place is, what it's for. And for our community to have a place of celebration of life and consider that as a cemetery, I think is something that we look forward to.
Thank you. Director Mitchell?
Just for council's information, there is a plan this year to restart the review or the update to the municipal development plan, and certainly one of the items that is identified in that plan right now is the cemetery, or future cemetery areas, so that's certainly be an item for discussion and as part of that review as well.
Thank you very much. I think you've gone down the whole roll there, so I just want to commend you for the presentation and welcome you to Lacombe and your work, and I just want to thank you for speaking with the Legion, number one. That is definitely a group of people that is vested there and is very important, and I'm sure through your travels, and you do this everywhere, but you never mentioned it in your report, funeral homes. You spend a lot of time there, and I know that they take great care and pride in our cemetery in Lacombe, so they would be another group too.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might, I was negligent in not mentioning that we met with the funeral home today as well as monument suppliers. So, yeah, and if there are others we've missed, please be sure to highlight that for us.
That's super, and I like the inclusion or the incorporation of art and diversity of culture as well. That is a growing concern, not only in our province but in our country here and in Lacombe. So thank you very much for that. Any further questions? Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming out.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing back from you. All right. I know we're a little bit ahead of time, but we have one more presentation from W.J. McQuestion. Is Bill in the building?
Yes.
Is he ready to go 10 minutes early? Evening, Bill.
Evening.
You're good to go 10 minutes early?
Yep, fine with me.
Super.
I wasn't expecting such a great amount of support. Well, there seems to be more than one issue here. Imagine that.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Bill, and just with regards to the people in the lobby there, the speaker system does work out there, I think. You were hearing things out there?
Not really.
Okay. Could I get you to use the
Yeah.
mic there? That'd be awesome. And welcome. The floor is yours.
All right, well, I do thank you for the opportunity to present the facts of this snow removal issue to council. My wife was concerned that I would be too emotional about this and should be just factual. Her suggested opening statement was, there is a disconnect with the overzealous peace officer and a disorganized administration. But I think that's a little too harsh, so I won't use that as my opening. It would have been easier for me to simply pay the fine and the removal invoice and be done with it. I can afford it. But what's the impact on our seniors? The total cost is $230. In Calgary, they have a Snow Angel program where they encourage neighbors to shovel snow for the seniors they have living next to them. My son, Ian, took it upon himself to shovel the snow for our neighbors a few years ago. One of our seniors had a heart attack.
I don't know how long it is.
The other one is fighting cancer and had a kidney removed last year.
Just right around
Administration thinks I was angry about me getting the ticket. If either of them had received a ticket, I would have gone over the top. In my estimation, you are ruining the sense of community where we help each other. I will no longer allow my son to shovel their snow because his shoveling may not be up to the arbitrary standards of some bylaw officer. I can give you more detail if Will wants me to do that later. But where I start, I asked Norman to find out when the snow was removed by the contractor because the date was important in my case. In my discussion with Mr. Clark, I told him that it snowed on the 9th of January, and his reply was yes, but not until the evening. But remember that fact, it snowed. Norma said she checked, and here's the quote from the email. I do hereby confirm that the snow was removed from the sidewalk on January 9th, 2013. But in Michael's memo to council tonight, he states, the contract company was called on January 9th, 2013 at 5 o'clock, and the sidewalk was not cleaned until the 11th of January, 2013 at 12:30 p.m. Why the difference? That's what you have to ask yourselves. Now remember, I said that when it was shoveled was important. Administration did not touch upon my conversation with Mr. Clark about it snowing on the 9th of January. Why? Because the clock starts again. As a matter of fact, it started snowing at 6 p.m. on January 9th, 2013, and stopped at 9 o'clock p.m. on January 10th, 2013. It snowed 3.9 centimeters, or 1.5 inches. I had until 9 o'clock p.m. on January 12th, 2013 to clear my sidewalk in front of my property. It was done 32.5 hours early. I have the stats from the Alberta Government Weather Station here in Lacombe to support my facts. Yes, you have to pay the contractor because you told them to go and clean the sidewalk, but I do not have to pay you because of your own bylaw. On January 9th, as I said, you would have been an hour too late. On January 11th, you were 32.5 hours too early. I have the invoices. I'd like to give them back to you. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much.
People stay, this is like a fun party. I'll go stand at the back of the room. Right here. Oops.
All right, infrastructure services, solid waste roadmap.
Something about them sending the bills in the mail.
Dale McQuarrie.
They clean the sidewalk before the bill comes.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I'd just like to start by saying this truly is a representation of community engagement, and that was alluded to earlier. I think it's important not only are people passively engaged in this case, but actively engaged, and I think that's the best form of engagement. So I do commend you for that as citizens of the community. In terms of the information that will be presented to you this evening, I just want to review with you the, I guess the type of information or types of information that we'll go through. And before we do that, I want to say that it was never our intent with the solid waste roadmap to introduce or implement a one-size-fits-all strategy. We know that certainly there are differences between neighborhoods, and that was always acknowledged as we spoke about the solid waste roadmap and the implementation of that. Now, in terms of what's before you tonight, we're going to talk about the public consultation that did occur, so that you have some knowledge about that background. And that certainly doesn't preclude us from future public consultation, which will most certainly happen. That may take many different forms, everything from brochures being distributed to homes to open houses, but you can rest assured there will be future public consultation around this particular matter. Secondly, Councillor Connick presented a notice of motion at the last regular meeting of council that will be addressed this evening. And that notice of motion dealt with the pickup of rollout bins from back alleys. So certainly that we will speak to that. Thirdly, we have identified areas where the conversion from back alley dumpsters to rollout bins will occur in 2013. So we'll certainly talk about those areas that have been selected for this year. For those that may not know, this program is intended to be a 10-year program. It was never intended to introduce this program within a one-year time frame. It was the intent to introduce recycling in 2013. So in terms of the blue bins, that introduction is planned for 2013 at this time. And finally, after presentation of information and discussion with council, we will look to direction in terms of amending bylaw 316, which is the solid waste bylaw, allowing for pickup of roll-out bins within back alleys, or alternatively to reopen the solid waste roadmap. So council will have certainly every ability at their discretion to address this matter going forward as they see fit. But we want to ensure that everyone's informed and knowledgeable in terms of making those informed decisions. So this time I'll turn it over to our Director of Infrastructure Services, Matt Gowdy, and ask that he provide and elaborate in detail in regard to this information.
Thanks, CA McQuarrie. So I guess just a little bit of background on the overall purpose of the roadmap, and why it was initiated in the first place was, of course, to reduce overall waste, and increase some of the diversion, options for residents and try and get our overall waste down to make sure we're not getting into a situation where we have to, build a new landfill or look at other options for our waste disposal. So it's a long-term vision, as CEO McCory has indicated. It's a 10-year plan to be implemented over a long period. And one of the core tenets that we had at the beginning was that we would remain engaged with the community and certainly remain responsive to input they receive. So we're glad to see some of this input and sort of that's.
I get you to use the mic a little bit in there.
Sorry. Sure. So a little bit more background on, I guess, when this was presented and how the roadmap got presented to council, some of the timelines. On October 22nd, the roadmap was introduced to council. Some of the recommendations were contained right within the report, but that evening was just presented for information and to give everybody a first view of it. On November 13th, there was a second round of consideration by council, and the implementation plan was presented as discussed and endorsed by council. On the next meeting of council was the budget discussions, some of which centered around the recommendations of the solid waste roadmap, which of course had to be budgeted for. And then in December 10th, at council's regular meeting, there was adjustments made to the solid waste utility rates, which considered the solid waste roadmap recommendations as well. So it has been a long time coming, I guess. It has been an ongoing process through the end of last year, and I'm certainly happy to continue it this evening. So we did include an aspect of public consultation with the development of the solid waste roadmap. Public consultation included advertisements on Craze 113, Sunny 94. We had booths set up at the Harvest Fest Midway. We had booths set up at multiple farmers markets throughout the year, looking for input. And we also had information on the city's homepage, inviting people to take our survey. We had hard copies of the survey as well available throughout the community. And as was mentioned, we did receive nearly 2% feedback from the community, so just under 250 survey responses, which is a very good turnout for public consultation from what we've seen. So that's just a bit of background. Moving on to the actual memo that's before you this evening. I've got kind of a two-part, Report A, Report B. Report A, if I could go through that a bit, deals with Councillor Connick's notice of motion, which reads in part, the council directed administration to implement a change to the City of Lacombe solid waste roadmap to allow for roll-out bin pickup to be done through the back alleys. Excuse me. Now, kind of a red tape issue, just a technicality that since this notice of motion actually specifically states to reopen the solid waste roadmap, we have included that as an option for council. Unfortunately, the solid waste roadmap itself actually doesn't speak to the location of pickups for the rollout bins, back alleys or front lanes. So I've included in as well an option to look at the actual bylaw, which contains that information. So it's sort of speaking to what I hope Councillor Connick is looking for. But both of those options are there for council. The only thing being that the reopening of the solid waste roadmap itself would look at all the recommendations for implementation within the solid waste roadmap. I believe there's 6 for residential and 4 for commercial. And since it's a re-examining of a previously endorsed motion, then that requires 5 of 7 votes to reopen. The other motion only requires 50% since it is a new motion itself. So, if we could scroll down a bit, just go through a bit more background. So you've got some of the residential recommendations of the solid waste roadmap there. The switching of dumpsters to rollouts being 6 overall, and the rest dealing with recycling, the recycle depot, our compost system, and a consideration for bi-weekly collection service sometime in the future. That goes through a bit of our public consultation, and then I believe there is a list of where we had proposed to take a look at the pilot program to determine what the best way to move forward was. As Councilor McQuarrie indicated, it has always been our plan to try a mixture of both front yard pickup and rear lane pickup to determine what's the best for different community types. Obviously what works for an area that has front garages may not work in an area that has no front drives allowed. There's different things in different communities that certainly would, I think, push the pickup, the reopening of the solid waste roadmap, and one being an amendment to bylaw 16. If there's any questions or comments, I can certainly field those.
Thank you. Councillor Creasy.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Matt, I just want to bring one point in the interest of clarity for everyone here, because you alluded it to in your speech tonight, plus in the solid waste roadmap, and that's with respect to the premise that we're faced with opening a new landfill. And I think there's some misconceptions there that I really want to make people clear of. You alluded to it, like I said, in the report, that the 10,000 ton limit has absolutely nothing to do with household garbage whatsoever. And that's based on dry rubble, which is a totally different thing. And we're not faced with opening a new landfill for many, many decades, or at the Farintosh site, the West Drive Meat Lake site. And I think that people need to be aware of this, because it is confusing the way that it's worded. The two have nothing to do with one another.
It's true that dry rubble is separate from household waste, that's correct. As far as whether a new landfill will be needed in the near future or far future, I would say it's certainly in the near future. That is a limit that we've come close to exceeding for the past 5 years as well.
Which limit is this?
The 10,000 tons per year limit at our current apprentice landfill.
For the dry rubble?
Correct.
Exactly, so that's what I'm getting at. The dry rubble and household garbage are two totally separate things. We can ship garbage till we're blue in the face to household garbage to Farintosh.
To Drive Meat Lake.
Sorry, to West Drive Meat Lake.
Yep.
One and the same. It's got nothing to do with it. There is no 10,000 ton limit. There's no 20,000 ton limit. There is no limit. In theory, I'm not suggesting that we go out and get all the garbage we can to send there.
The dry rubble.
No. Oh, West Drive Meat has got nothing to do with dry rubble. Dry rubble goes to Prentice, stays in Prentice. Household garbage goes to West Drive Meat Lake.
Correct.
So that's one of the premises of this whole thing that I have a very serious problem with. We're coming about it from the wrong perspective. The two are totally separate. And I'm not suggesting that we be poor stewards of our environment, or that go out of our way to not recycle and all the rest of it. But to try and lead people to believe that these two are related, and that somehow we're faced with this $12 to $15 million bill, theoretically, of coming up with a reclassification of Prentice because of household garbage, is completely false.
Certainly the intent of the roadmap and the changes contained therein are to reduce overall use. Reduce overall our solid waste load. But you're right, certainly the dry rubble is a separate issue from the household waste. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't going over that for some sort of a reaction from the crowd. That's not the intent here. I just want this to be factual, and for people to have the proper information, because we do have some waste issues. The reason that I spoke out against this to start with is because we're implementing some plans on the regional level, and it was my hopes that we would just calm down on things for a little bit and see where that took us. I think we've got some very, very useful and important information in that roadmap, but I would like to see it be revisited.
Thank you. Councillor Bausman.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. In light of the conversation and the information received from Councillor Creasy, it makes me concerned actually then that if we go to the system that is proposed with the rollout bins, that some of the quote unquote garbage that is presently put into the bins, even though it is truly considered as dry rubble, will no longer be able to be placed in the rollout bins because of the size, the physical size, which ultimately reduces our overall volume that we create. But then that dry rubble is going to end up being hauled over to the Prentice dump, and then we are definitely at that point going to have an issue with volume, where we're at 95–98% now. It's going to tip over, and we're going to have a bigger problem. So I would certainly like to suggest that we revisit this entire roadmap.
Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Each one of us have had a lot of each one of us have had an awful lot of feedback from the community, and it's quite obvious that there are many pieces to this roadmap, and until tonight I had not heard anything about anything but garbage pickup. So I'm glad that some others have finally brought the concerns of the whole piece, because it is a very large component, and we need to definitely revisit this whole thing, because we need a lot more feedback, obviously, from the community as to what we need to do. We have been told very strongly from our community that we need to be better environmentally, and we are not good environmental stewards of our society. I'll guarantee you that. You can go into anybody's garbage and it is not being used properly. We have been asked to be good stewards. We are being asked to be counselors. We are being asked to look after your community, and we need the feedback. So I'm very happy to get that feedback tonight. But please remember that we are looking at a whole picture here, and it's extremely important that we do the right thing. And there are many pieces that communication, we've got to get the message out there about each and every piece that we are doing. The whole Lacombe Solid Waste Authority that we belong to as a member community. I was a chair for many years. Trust me, we have some serious problems out there as well. It has to do with dry rubble, absolutely. It does not have to do with garbage. But we are trucking garbage out to Camrose, and we are trucking way too much garbage out to Camrose. So we do need to do a better job. How is that going to look like in Lacombe? I think what I'm hearing is a message that we need to look at it a lot better and communicate and really reinforce the education piece that I think each one of us would like to see done better. And I really compliment all of you for coming out tonight to voice that. So thank you.
Councillor Kite, then Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I very much appreciate everything that I have heard today from the public and the comments from council and administration so far. I also wanted to reiterate Councillor Foster's comments. I am fully aware of the many challenges that we face regarding the pickup, but I would like to talk about the content of garbage. And if you have read the roadmap and the information that is there, it clearly states that over 30% of our garbage, household garbage currently, is all recyclable material. And so if we could reduce that 30%, it would already reduce cost substantially, regardless of the method of pickup. And I think that when this was first brought to council, and we have talked about garbage for years. Every time we go to AUMA conventions, we talk about garbage. When we go to FCM conventions, federally, we talk about garbage, and we compare what we do as a municipality versus what other municipalities in the province and in the country do, and we are way behind. We are 50 years behind, if we look at across the border as far as how we deal with our garbage. And so I just wanted to let you know where we're coming from when we are looking at the waste management strategy. that it is not simply about picking up garbage, but it's about what we do with our garbage before it goes to the bin.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. A couple of things I wanted to highlight tonight. I have a bit of a unique perspective in that when I first moved to Lacombe 10 years ago, I lived on Old Garden Road, and that part of that section of Garden Road had roll-out bins. That was my first use of the roll-out bin. I never had that previously in a community. And I liked it for a number of reasons. One of the reasons I liked it, it forces you to be more conscious of your garbage, how much you throw away, how much you can recycle, and so forth. And alluding to Councillor Kite's comments, we need to do better with what we do with our garbage and how much recycle and so forth. And I think the small roll-out bins help us do that. So in that respect, I support their implementation in some respects. I agree, I don't think they need to be on the front curb. I think if garbage is picked up in the back alley, that's where it needs to remain picked up, along with the recyclables. And the second point I want to make is that it's been suggested that some of the changes that we had brought forth were done on a whim, so to speak. They weren't. A lot of the last couple of years, we've received a lot of complaints with dumping in bins in back alleys, how unsightly some of the back alleys had become, and this is one of the reasons that brought about the review and brought about the roadmap. As well, we had many requests from citizens to do a better job of recycling. They weren't happy with the Wolf Creek Recycle Depot. They wanted home-to-home recycling. So and that's another reason why we brought forth some of these changes. That being said, tonight is a beautiful example of democracy in action. And it's great to see you all come out here. And obviously there are some serious concerns that have been brought forth. And I would agree that perhaps we need to revisit then the roadmap and look at it again. I would concur that we need better public consultation. Ms. Pickett had alluded to a number of 2% previously in public consultation. I would wager there's probably another 2 to 3% here tonight. Frankly, I don't think that's enough. I think we need to have more public consultation, and I like the idea that you suggested, Louise, about maybe not so much a plebiscite in this fall's election, but a couple of questions. I looked at the MGA and the Local Authorities, or Local Elections Authorities Act, and we're well within our purview to put a couple of questions on the ballot this fall. And that way we can garner perhaps much more response, and we can get, however many people vote, maybe in the neighborhood of 20, 30, 40%, in response to those questions. And they could be simple questions. Are you in favor of the current garbage pickup with the big bins and Wolf Creek Recycling, yes or no? A second question could be, are you in favor of transitioning to small roll-out bins and roll-out bins for recycling? So I think that would garner a lot more information and give us a little bit of a read of what people are thinking as well. So in the meantime, yeah, I think we should revisit this, relook at it, maybe put certain parts of it on hold. I think Matt has done a tremendous job in putting together the roadmap. I feel there are certain sections of it that perhaps we need to revisit or put on hold for the moment, but certainly, we've gotten a lot of feedback, and that's great, and I thank you all for that.
Councillor Rempel?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I'm not going to say a lot. I think how I feel is how our other councillors feel as well in regards to having to reduce our garbage. There's no doubt that we have to. I am encouraged by the number of people that have come out tonight, and at the same time, I have to say I'm a little disappointed by some of the emails that I and other councillors and administration have received. There's a concern when people aren't treated with respect, and I was quite disappointed with some of the emails that were sent out in regards to why we were doing this. Like Councillor Connick said, this wasn't something that we just decided we're going to change, and we're changing it all in 1 year. And I think a lot of people had some misinformation. Part of that, I believe, was the fault of us not communicating properly. We have definitely tried to be transparent and open, and we have done, I think, a way better job lately than we have in the past. But at the same time, we were told that a 2%, poll isn't really great, and at the same time, here tonight, I think we probably have closer to 1%. So does that mean that the people we talked to, the 2% wasn't important, but only 1% is? No, I don't think so. I think everybody's important. I think the 2% is actually quite good. Lots of times we don't get near that many people. One of the things that I think we all get a little frustrated with is when information goes out that isn't correct. And when people start hearing this information and they get upset, at least we get some action, at least we get people coming out. But I would encourage people to come and talk to us, do some research. I appreciate what I have got. Like I said, I think a lot of those emails could have been said a little bit nicer, but I've thick skin. I can take it. It's just a little frustrating to have to go through that when we are all trying to do the best for our community, and our community involves you, but it also involves 12,000 other people. And I believe that we need to take a look at this again and make some changes and make sure we communicate with people a little better. And I think that will make for a better outcome to this situation that most people be happy with. I can guarantee you, everybody will not be happy. We will never ever have 100% consensus on how we do this. So we need to make sure that we do what is best for our community and best for the majority of people here, and hopefully that is what we come up with, and it will be acceptable to people tonight. So thank you for coming.
You got one there. All right. Councillor Creasy.
That was a short speech.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I guess just to reinforce what Councillor Kite said, just so there's no misunderstandings there, she had said a third of waste is recyclable and reusable. It's actually closer to about 80%, which is a very positive thing. And actually a third is just organic waste, which can in fact be taken care of a little easier than that. So while we do have certainly some methodology to help us with this, the simple fact of the matter is no one, I shouldn't say no one, extremely few in Lacombe choose to take responsibility for the garbage, and it costs us a lot of money. So this is a good wake-up call for each and every one of us to take note of that, and hopefully we can come up with a better plan to address in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Creasy. That segues perfectly into my comments. This is definitely something that has been in the works for a long time. There's been a lot of staff time, there's been a lot of research, and I want to commend Director Gowdy for the work that he put into this study. How we come to working on these reports, the information that we gather, is very, very, very important. And it is sad to me that we are happy when we get 2% of our community to come out and actually fill out a survey and give us their opinion on things that we, as council, that you elect, have to make decisions on. And it's not unique to Lacombe. I'm a vice president with the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association. It is very common across the whole province. But there's some communities that do things differently, and maybe we should start looking at how we gather information differently. For an example, City of Grand Prairie has Municipal Governance Day, where they have a barbecue in the park. It's a gated park. There's only one point of entrance, and when you come in, you have to fill out 3 surveys or whatever issues they have coming up that year before you get your tickets for your hot dogs and your pop and your chips. And maybe that's something that we have to look at. And as residents, like I said earlier, we make decisions based on the information that we gather. Now I want to touch on an example of listening to people. We are here to listen to you. I am so happy. I heard at McDonald's the other day that we were going to have 900 seniors and it was going to be a riot. I wish we had 900 seniors. I would have loved to have, you know, if we could fit 900 of you here, we'd make you all fill out the survey, then we could continue forward. But I just want to stress the importance of the information that we get, because we can only make decisions based on information gathered. And Louise, we've talked many times, I'm not kidding, that I think we're going to hire you to get you out, to get people out to these things. So that's number one, is the information that is given to us and we have to work with is so important. So I enjoyed some of these emails because some of these emails had solutions. It wasn't just complaints, there was solutions, there was ideas, there was things, good information given to us, and that is great. And come to us with solutions, work together. An example, and there's people here in this room, I think many of you will remember the last couple of years we've had some flooding issues. We had an angry brood of people coming to meet with us. We thought it was 3 or 4 to begin with, but I think it was about 35 showed up. And Norma and I it was kind of like a bad interview. We were on one side of the table, they were on the other. But that turned out to be a great, great thing because we worked together. The information was given to us. We passed that on to our engineers. We devised a plan with that information that was given to us. And we've done the work now. We just have a little bit of work to do with regards to Bruns Pond, but that project will be finalized, and knock on wood, will mitigate further flooding issues. So that is a prime example of our citizens coming forward, working together with council, and it worked. This is another instance that I don't think any one of these people sitting here today is opposed to gathering information from you. You guys coming to council, if we have to do something dumb and mean to get you out, I don't want to do that. I want you guys to be engaged all the time. Education is a huge thing, as Councillor Creasy and Councillor Kite talked about. So much of our garbage isn't garbage. We are horrible stewards of our garbage here in Lacombe, and one of the main reasons is the 3-meter bins. It's too easy. I've never heard a lawnmower being thrown in there, but I heard that story today that a lawnmower they found in a 3-meter bin. I've been to bin fires with our local fire department where we found coyote carcasses. There's always a TV or a computer in there. One of your emails, and I don't know who, but said the bin was so convenient because they can throw their yard waste into there. That's not what these bins are for. I love my bin in my backyard. So how do we educate people to use them properly? To be responsible stewards of our garbage. And educate, Councillor Kite talked about going to conferences. And they talked about educate. But at some point, we all know. So what do? In some of your emails, it says, find the offenders. Well, these bins serve 6 houses. Who do we find? Okay, 4, sorry. Who do we find? So there's a lot more issues here than just pick up in the front or the back. And I appreciate very, very much everybody coming out and being a part of this, and look forward to working with you to make this happen. So thank you very much. And I think we have to make a decision here with regards to where we're going with this. Looking for a motion. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So I haven't got the information in front of me, but I think the essence of my motion is that we reopen the solid waste roadmap to further public consultation and discussion for the whole thing, because there are pieces in there that are important, and I think it just gets that message out further to everyone. So does that satisfy the motion?
I believe that is an option. Discussion? Motion is on the floor. Questions? Councillor Belsman?
For clarification on that type of motion, we're in effect rescinding our motion of November 13th, 2012, and that would require 5 out of 7 of us to agree. Am I correct?
That is correct, Councillor Bosma. And that's in accordance with Council's procedure or bylaw.
That's right. Councillor Creasy?
However we decide to go with those two, I would ask that the vote's recorded in the interest of the group before us.
Thank you very much. As a recorded vote has to be requested by a councillor. So.
I would like my vote recorded, please.
Well, I think it's recorded now.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Doreen, could you?
I didn't get the full motion. What I do have is Councillor Foster moved to open the solid waste roadmap to further public consultation and discussion.
Councillor Creasy?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Well, I have no problem with that motion. I just want some clarification on the procedure. Do we have to, in fact, rescind our previous motion that enacted the roadmap?
To Councillor Creasy, you do not have to rescind your initial motion. That remains on the books in the minutes. This is a further motion, and in accordance with your procedure bylaw, because it's counter to that original motion, or the direction is counter to that original motion, you need 5 members of council voting in favor of this motion.
Thanks for that clarification.
Any further discussion, questions? All those in favor of the motion? Unanimously carried. Thank you. And thank you all for coming out, and stick around for the rest of the meeting. Yeah, we'll take a short break here as well. We'll take 10 minutes. Thank you.
Infrastructure required for development being funded by the development or the developers of that benefiting property, which requires there's no deficit, I guess, for our existing ratepayers to pick up then for the infrastructure that's required for these developments. But then we've also proposed a couple of percent reductions, 90%, 80%, 70%. And you could go right down to 0% if you wanted, I suppose. But for every 10%, what we've shown in this chart, for every 10% reduction, which is really a very arbitrary reduction. I mean, the numbers for the infrastructure are best estimates, so it's going to cost what it's going to cost. But for every reduction of 10%, that leaves an infrastructure deficit of about $6 million, or about $500 per resident, to be funded by existing residents instead of benefiting land developers. So I guess the question that council needs to consider is, what is the benefit to existing residents? Is that benefit worth $500? Is it worth $1,000 or $1,500, etc.? To have that development happen in the city, certainly there is a benefit to existing residents from increased access to goods, increased recreation facilities, that sort of thing. But I guess what does that value look like is the question. I guess I would throw it over to Mr. Mushins if you have any further comments, or should we open it up for council's discussion?
Yeah.
Welcome, fellas, and I'm sorry everybody left.
That's a little disappointing, but that's okay. I don't really have anything specific to say. I suppose it would be easier to answer questions than anything. I guess typically with off-site levies, one of the things that's maybe a little bit different here, for instance, on the western side of Lacombe, they benefit from fairly significant road improvements on Elizabeth Lake Drive and the extension of that down to Highway 12, plus the upgrade of C&E Trail to the north end. So you start looking at some very significant costs that are only attributable really to one part of the city. On the eastern side, you've got the upgrade of 34th Street, or the final construction of it to the north, which was really a truck bypass. So that's servicing a different kind of purpose than say some of the arterial roads, where you could kind of suggest that generally everybody benefits from those arterial roads. There's no question. To attribute a percentage to the developable lands in those areas is, I think, in a lot of cases, a little bit more of a political decision than it is a hard numbers fact. Most of the time, if you're lucky enough, you have some fairly significant cost-saving measures through grants. Unfortunately, a lot of your capital works programs are going to be consuming most of those grants, and so you're looking at this situation where you're having to fund this without the grant. And then now you have to just look at how do you apportion these costs. Now, I should just mention a couple things that come into play here. We tried to estimate what it would take to service different development nodes, and in most cases, whether we include the cost of that item in a levy or not, the developer still has to pay for those things. If you include it in a levy, then you assume that he will pay for the levies on a per unit basis or per hectare basis, and whatever's left over that you don't include in the levies, he's going to pay for up front anyway. So these are true costs, approximated costs, the best we can do here. So by reducing or taking away, I mean, we are using a 300 millimeter diameter water main, for instance, as a trunk main, and it's included in the levy component here. There is a lot of 300 millimeter water main that we've identified as being needed to service these areas. We've also got some larger ones. You elected, for instance, to say we don't want to include 300 water mains, then where the developer has to install them, he pays for them up front, but you just don't cover them in the levy system. So you do have some ability to look at, and of course you are dealing with trying to compare levies to comparable communities nearby. You know, obviously you don't want to have levies set far too high. That scares people away, of course. And you don't want to have them far too low, because although you might draw a lot of people, the actual construction costs are still going to be fairly high for the developers anyway. So anyway, it is it's a simple fact to lay out a servicing scheme. The choice of which items you elect to include in here is certainly something that is probably a significant component of the decision. In terms of the different areas, some areas have very high levies. If you look, for instance, at the West Area Structure Plan node, it's bearing a significant cost to get water there and some looping costs because it's down out of the way, and it has a fairly significant water main levy component to it. It's also a fairly significant part of the arterial road construction going down through there as well. So, you know, technically, if you try to charge all of the real costs to that particular section, it would be astronomical. So you have to kind of spread them out some way. So anyway, I just a couple comments there, and I'll leave it to questions or Matt. Or
Mr. Gandhi, yep.
Just one last note that I should have mentioned. When Mike has referenced something like, say, the upgrade of C&E Trail that benefits certain development areas, but certainly has a benefit for the existing community as well, that has already been taken into account with the 100% recommendation. So that's 100% of the recommendation, which in amongst that already, roads that benefit the community, we might say, well, that's 50% to the community and 50% to developers already. So that's not saying 100% all to developers for everything, because there is things that benefit the community as well, right? Upgrades to our reservoirs, upgrades to our lagoon treatment center. These are benefits that benefit existing ratepayers, and that has already been taken into account with the full recommended levy rates. So the reduction from 100% is really sort of an economic development driver. It's really not defensible, I guess, from a pure engineering point of view. It's really something to say we're open for business and we want to encourage development, that sort of thing.
Thank you, and I guess you're looking for first reading tonight. I just have one question, just so that it matches up with the rest of the of the off-site levy rates in central Alberta. Sylvan Lake shows a dollar amount per dwelling unit. So what's the average number of dwelling units per hectare?
10 to 12.
So to make them comparable, so the numbers are the same, you would take that 8855 times 10 to 12. So they'd be in the 88,000 range, 89,000 range. Thank you. Director Mitchell?
Just on that note, having seen Sylvan Lake's bylaw, their densities are considerably higher than what we have in the community, and so that's why they do use a dwelling unit number. They've, our typical average, and I'm now mixing things up here, is we strive between 4 and 5 per acre. They're closer to 6 to 8, and so they have gone to where we have struggles with infrastructure because we don't have enough development to cover that linear frontage development. They are actually on the other side of the fence, and so they've moved towards more of a per dwelling unit. So the 10 to 12 might be a bit low in terms of the actual impact on individual properties.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. My thoughts, and thanks, Matt, for bringing up the economic development side of things. It's very clear to me that we need some economic drivers. I can't support the 100% right off the bat. And I'm going to use the logistics of going back a few years when we had the Wolf Creek industrial lots for sale. We advertised the fact that we were going to cost the land, and that stimulated quite a bit of sales. So my suggestion is that, we do need development. And I think we could do it by maybe reducing, and here's my numbers that I came up with arbitrarily, and it certainly can be looked at, but 70% in 2013, and we advertised the heck out of this, telling everybody that this is our focus. 80% in 2014 and 100% in 2015 going forward. So just a suggestion, but it's hopefully going to stimulate somebody that's thinking of doing some stuff here. I don't think we can be competitive at 100% because we do want to stimulate the economic stimulus, and we've got some pretty good stiff competition around the area, so that's just my thoughts.
Councillor Belsler? Councillor Connick?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Some of the comments that Councillor Foster made, I fully understand and fully support, in that going with 100% levy right now is it may not be prudent. I can see us giving first reading to this evening. I understand there's going to be a meeting coming up shortly with some potential developers, to discuss this a little bit further. But I also think that because this is a large issue, this is a big issue that will affect our viability in our community for some time. I would almost like to recommend that we have a good, thorough discussion of this item at a committee meeting prior to us having a second and third reading, just so that we can be fully conversant, because it's really easy for us to just to quickly go through this report and oh yeah, that sounds good, but I think a little bit more attention to this matter is appropriate. So I'd like to suggest that.
Thank you. Councillor Connick, then Councillor Kite.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I too would like to echo the comments from Councillor Belsman and Councillor Foster. I think we have to be really careful here. I know at one point development was all gung-ho here in this community, and it's slowed right down, and I'd be interested to see what the development community has to say about the numbers and so forth, but this is something we have to be very careful on. We want growth in this community, and it's stalled as of late, and we don't want to go to 100% right out the kicker. I think you're absolutely correct. We need to either phase that in or take a good long look at how we do that, because it has slowed as of late, and we need to get it back rolling again.
Councillor Kite?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I just wanted to concur with what Councillor Foster said, and would very much be in favor of a committee meeting to go over this, since definitely it is not my area of expertise either.
Thank you. And I think as far as first reading, to get it on the table and be able to kick it around a bit and have it discussed, I think is in order here. Anybody willing to? Oh, Councillor Creasy, gonna weigh in.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Just wanted a little clarification within this report for the comparison table. I was curious with the year dates that are put in brackets behind all of the communities there. Was that when these costs were implemented, or is that the cost during that time period, or what does that mean?
That would be the last date of review of those costs for those communities. So, in answer to your question, it's both. That's both when they were implemented, and that's the cost in those days dollars estimated at that time.
Very good, and that's obviously then still what they're charging today.
Correct.
Okay. So because we're not working with outdated information, which it kind of appears that way when you first look at it.
That's correct.
Okay.
I believe Black Falls is undertaking right now the same thing that we are, and I'm not sure if any of the other communities, Jordan, off the top of your head, if anyone else is looking at.
I know a number of communities have talked about it. It's obviously fairly important. Anything that's 5 years old or older, the costs have skyrocketed, as everybody knows, in the last few years. It's still continuing to go up. So I do know that there's emphasis in Olds to update it, and a number of others as well. So they will be updating them. And yes, these are in, say, when it says 2005, they were $2,005. In some cases, they put some escalation clauses in. I don't have so much detail on that at the moment, but they have an ability to increase them over time. This is what their current bylaw states at this time.
Thank you for that. That changes my next question, so I won't worry about it. I just make a suggestion for our future committee meetings, if I could. If I could just make a suggestion for our future meetings, if we could get a breakdown, it would be kind of helpful, just because these are public documents, and I expect that some of the developers will anticipate seeing the information. You've alluded to the costs for the various levies as far as water, sanitary, storm, and transportation, but not for those average components with respect to the proposed numbers for Lacombe today, and I'd like to see that as well.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
So, on the comparison chart, you have the typical water, sanitary, storm, and transportation levies.
Yep.
But then on the proposed figure for Lacombe of the $80,000 plus or minus, there's no breakdown of how that factors into it.
Of like which portion is water, which
sanitary.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can have that.
If we could, that would be helpful too. Thank you.
Director Gowdy, and then Councillor Foster and Councillor Bessler.
I would just add, Councillor Creasy, it is, there's quite an in-depth document that Mr. Mushins has worked on attached to this that breaks that down, not just in terms of water, sewer, roads. It has the actual infrastructure listed, and instead of giving a typical average, there is actually maps showing exactly which portions will be attributed to which lands. So there's quite a bit more detail available in the attached reports as well, but certainly I'll bring the typical, I have that as well.
Thank you, that should be sufficient to confuse that kind of me, so I appreciate that.
Councillor Foster, then Councillor Bessler.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So, according to what Councillor Bousman says, we should proceed with first reading, and I think I'm hearing that. Does it matter? Do we go with the first recommendation, or with, are you okay with going with mine? Does it matter?
Whoever makes the motion and says what they want, and it gets it on the table for discussion.
Okay. So I'd make the motion then that we take the second alternative, undertake the first reading of the new offset levy bylaw and proceed with hosting an information session with developers and affected homeowners on April 16th, 2013 at 2 o'clock in City Hall, presenting the new off-site levies with the council specified reduced rate as follows. 70% in 2013, 80% in 2014, and 100% in 2015.
I do believe this is implemented in 2014 for the first year, correct? So it'll be 14, 15, 16.
Sorry. 14, 15, 16.
Okay.
So in saying that, I just want to, I guess, be comfortable that that time frame is sufficient for getting out to all the developers, because that seems like a pretty short window. I don't know if that's sufficient or not.
Well, and I think that there was an aspect discussed this evening as well as bringing it to a committee meeting as well. And the next committee meeting, scheduled committee meeting, would be May 6th. So that was part of the motion as well. That wouldn't hurt. Director Gubby, did you have an answer to that?
Well, I was just going to say April 16th is certainly a target, probably for the public consultation portion. I think we'll look at logistics and just make sure that we select a date that we can get enough information out there to make sure people are advised. It's a little bit easier for this kind of an open house because we are targeting our audience, and they're all people with vested interests. But we certainly want to make sure we get a representative buy-in.
Councillor Belsman?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. As part of the information for our committee meeting, I'm wondering if it is possible to do a bit of a comparison. Now we have a comparison already here tonight in a chart showing the off-site levies that are being charged by various communities in Central Alberta. But do we really truly understand, are we really truly comparing apples to apples? And the reason I ask that is because we may have a very unique situation within our community that demands that our off-site levies are higher, or other communities have unique situations where they have that same sort of issue. I wouldn't mind knowing a bit more information relative to each of these other communities and what effect that has had on their levies. I think that'd be good information for us to understand and for us to reason why we are choosing what we do. So I don't know if that's acceptable. That's a fair amount of work, but it is certainly make it more clear to each one of us why we are doing what we're doing.
So I guess there's a question, and is that with regards to size, to population, to demographic, to geographics, hills and bumps and lakes, and you know what other kind of comparisons are you looking for, Peter?
You want me to just say yes? I think, I mean, we have a geographical issue in the West Area Plan because that's going to demand, because of where the services are located, that's going to demand a high cost to bring services there and to make that whole area work in order for residential subdivision to happen at some point in that area. Do other communities have the same issues? That's sort of what I'm looking for.
Okay, thank you. CEO McQuarrie.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. To Councillor Bosma, certainly each community is unique in terms of their challenges, in terms of topography and infrastructure requirements. The intent of an off-site levy is that it pay for future development, the cost of future development that will benefit those areas. So certainly it's very hard to start to draw the types of comparisons you're asking for. The infrastructure that we need to develop, it's required infrastructure, so we can't vary from that. And it may be very different from the infrastructure required in Sylvan Lake versus Olds versus the city of Red Deer. So it does become difficult when you start comparing. Certainly we want to remain competitive, and we don't want to stifle economic development in any way. At the same time, we need to find a way of paying for future infrastructure requirements. So I don't know that a comparison of requirements, if I hear you correctly, is as valid as what are they paying in off-site levies based on their requirements versus what we're paying, because we can't change that.
I understand that very well. It ultimately comes down to this. A developer is going to pick 1 or 2 or 3 communities to review where they want to invest their money, and Lacombe happens to be the highest offsite levies. You know, even, I mean, there's all sorts of comparisons that have to happen and in their assessment of where to go. But if we have to have a good balanced playing field, and that is the key. I mean, the reality is, if we don't get some residential development here happening for next year, boy, we're hooped for a while. And in order to see our community grow quicker, and so we need to create a proper balance here. And I thought that sort of information would be beneficial, even if it's at a high level. I don't have a problem with that.
Thank you. Director Gowdy, did you have?
Well, I was just gonna further to what Norma had, see if Corey had indicated there, was that, what we have undertaken here is a very thorough and defensible position based on the actual cost and infrastructure that is required for specific benefit areas. To compare them to other ones, other communities directly, I mean, it is going to be quite a task to determine which areas are low, high, and old, that sort of thing. And when you drill down to some of the numbers, I think a lot of communities are not going through nearly as thorough and extensive of a development of these levies as we have. I mean, if you look at Innisfail and Olds there, 10,000 a hectare and 8,000 a hectare, I mean, those are going to be set by that's what it is. You don't come up with 10,000 with a detailed study. That's saying it's probably about 10,000. Set that, so we're collecting something. What we've done here is above and beyond what other communities have undertaken, and I think is certainly the best way to set the initial costs.
Thank you very much. CEO McQuarrie.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Just one other point for council in that if we're not being methodical and we're not determining the cost of this infrastructure, then of course it's being paid for through your tax base, so it's being paid for by existing taxpayers. And so in striking that balance that you referred to, Councillor Bosma, I think that it's important that we try and strike that balance, that we remain competitive from an economic development perspective, but also that the burden not be placed solely on the existing taxpayer versus future development. And that's the balance we're looking for as a community.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. And Doreen, do you have that there? Could you just read that?
Moved by Councillor Foster, Council undertake the first reading of the new offsite levy bylaw and proceed with hosting an information session with developers and affected homeowners on April 16th at 2 p.m. in City Hall, presenting the new offsite levies with council specified reduced rate.
Do you have briefs there?
Yes, there's. $70% in 2013, 80% in 2014, and 100% going forward.
So that just has to move a year because it was starting in 2014.
Okay.
Instead of 2002.
Councillor Bosma.
Just a point of clarification, just to understand procedure, if we agree to this first reading and we go to the next reading, if we feel that the staged off-site levy program isn't appropriate or we want to adjust the numbers, do we have that opportunity on second or third reading?
To Councillor Bosma, you certainly have the ability to make an amendment at second or third reading, yes.
Councillor Creasy?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Perhaps this was discussed outside of the room, and forgive me if it's repetitive, but was it our intent to have the council discussion prior to the developer and public engagement process?
No, after. Get the information from developers and then bring it back to committee for discussion is what was talked about here.
Wonderful, thank you, I appreciate that. I just didn't want to send the wrong message, because sometimes people misinterpret these first readings, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? So carried. I think that's another record for length of time for first reading. We will bounce down to Economic Development and Community Services Municipal Sustainability Plan. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out and being patient and hanging with us here.
Thank you.
And we will ask our Economic Development Manager to wake up and have a stretch and come on up to the table there, Keith. And thank you for your patience. I wasn't aware that you were going to be here this evening. So welcome, and the floor is yours. Great one, there you go.
Doing there, sorry. Good evening, Mayor Christie and Council. I will attempt to be brief. What you have before you is an update on the Municipal Sustainability Plan, or it has become to be known, Imagine Lacombe. As you're aware, this project is very significant to the direction of the community, as it will establish a comprehensive and long-term sustainability vision and plan. The first part of this project was geared towards data collection. Given the importance of the project, the CSTAT committee wanted to ensure a large number of responses was secured, thereby providing a more representative sample for us to review. I'm happy to say the goal of 1,200 responses, that would be the equivalent of 10% of our population, was exceeded as a result of some very hard work from the CSTAT committee, council representatives, and city administration. The next steps in the process are to process all the feedback that was provided from the residents and cluster them into common themes. These themes will then be used to develop a recommended action plan with corresponding priorities. Finally, this will be condensed into a draft MSP this summer. So things are progressing, and with that, I'm open to comments and questions you may have.
Did you say 10%?
10% of our population.
That's 5 times of what we're happy with. Congratulations, and thank you for that hard work, and let's bring those suggestions forward and gaining information. Director Mitchell?
So just further to that, I want to caution council in terms of this was over 10 weeks, 10-week process involving well over a dozen different public events that we attended. Certainly, if this sets the standard, there's a certain amount of resources and time that's needed to get out there. People don't come to us, we have to go to them. That's basically what we're discovering in terms of all of our consultation right now. Whether it's this or whether it's our other successful components in our heritage program, where we've been able to engage the public. That's a much smaller group, but our involvement with that group has certainly been more proactive. But that does extend deadlines, it does extend timelines in terms of when you are making major policy decisions. If the expectation is to be able to reach that many people, it won't be done in 2 weeks, it won't be done in 3 weeks. This is a big exercise from that point of view. And we also have to caution as well that at some point your public does get tired. If you're going to do this, expect this for every single topic you're going to wear them out as well. So you do have to be very strategic in terms of how you go out to the public with these issues.
Thank you very much. Director Vaughn, did you have?
I was going to say what Michael said.
Super. Thank you. Councillor Kite and Councillor Rempel.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I just wanted to commend Guy and his administration group for the work done so far. This is a huge undertaking, and it has been a lot more work than we as the committee, I think, envisioned in the beginning. And so it has been a very educational process for us as well. But the results are starting to come in, and so it's very gratifying to see now where we go from here. And so just wanted to say thank you and pass that along to your team, because you've done a huge amount of work.
Thank you. Councillor Rempel.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Councillor Kite pretty much said what I wanted to say, except for I really like this idea of having a zoo. Just saying.
Moving on from there, Councillor Foster, then Councillor Creasy, then Councillor Connick.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I guess I was kind of going to go the route of Michael when he stated that this process is quite different from what it was started, and I was involved at the beginning. As you recall, we elected, or the volunteers were Odie and Grant, and I was the alternate on that. So I started off with an awful lot of meetings, and it was, to be quite honest with what I saw, it was extremely discouraging at the very beginning. But you know what, you guys, you pulled up your socks, you came out with a different strategy completely, and everybody dug their heels in and made it work. And this is where we're going to need to go in the future. You know, we learned a very valuable lesson from this, but look at the response we got. Now, is it perfect? No, but it's a great start, and I think we're going to see a lot more involvement from our citizens, because we're going to be a little bit more focused on how we do that. So thank you, to echo Odie's comments, did a great job.
Councillor Creasy.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. For those of us that were involved somewhat with this process, I will say it is not an easy one. And just so that you are aware, the 1,200 responses, we went through a variety of different ways of engaging the public. And keep in mind that this is from school children, from special interest groups, from various types, from door to door, from restaurants and LMC and the arena and all over the place. So trying to get a good cross section. So in that this was difficult, the individual that has been hired to make sense out of this data has got a monumental task of trying to weight the priorities of seniors and school children and whatnot. So we've got a long way to go yet, but hopefully we gave her enough raw data to be able to come up with something sensible and usable for our community.
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Just the public meeting schedule, just looking at it here, so we're going into 2014 before it's all said and done, correct? Okay, no, it's just, I wanted to reiterate that. And I want to express, my thanks as well. I know it's a tremendous amount of work to get this type of input, and kudos to your group to doing that. And so, in saying that, I would like to make a motion then that we accept the Imagine Lacombe update as information.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion or questions? Guy, you want a closing statement? Anything further to go?
Actually, just one comment I wanted to make after Michael had stated that we can't do this every time. There are a number of things that we actually probably could replicate fairly easily that worked well on the fly too as well. So there are items that we could go to draw responses. I'm thinking about how Devin Kumar produced a video a week out, and we got about 50 or 60 responses in that last week. Those are things that we could absolutely implement, very easily. So there are elements that are going to be longer in duration, and there are elements that we've learned that we could use fairly quickly.
Thank you very much. I figured you waited long enough to present this. We should give them the time. Thank you, Guy. The motion is on the floor. All those in favor? So carried.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thank you. We'll go to the Director Minchin show. Bylaw enforcement, traffic bylaw 223. Director Minchin.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So before you tonight is the notice of motion that came from Councillor Connick with regards to the sidewalk provisions of bylaw 223. We've addressed that as well. We've also taken the opportunity to give council, we're hoping to wait till the end of snow season, and we thought actually, when we wrote the memo on Thursday, we hadn't hit the end of snow season. Wanted to provide council with an update in terms of the process that we followed. I know that came into question tonight, as well as some of the statistics in terms of how many times we were out this year and how many tickets we actually had to write. I think from having done this in other communities, I think the first statement I'd like to say is that the number of tickets we were forced to write this year was incredibly small relative to the number of property owners we have in the community. We were out a number of times since January, and the frequency of non-compliance is amazingly low. To give you an example, in Drumheller, where I was the last year I was at, we wrote close to 600 tickets. You know, we were averaging 20 to 30 here a month, so 140, 150 tickets. So for a first year, I expected significantly higher, given the fact that this is the first year of this proactive model. But it just goes to show you how community-minded our residents are already. The flip side of that is, I think we had about 3 or 4 trips and falls that our insurance had to deal with last year. I'm aware of one right now, but that hasn't come through on our insurance side. So, you know, certainly from a safety point of view, which is the primary driver here, we've seen some major improvements in that as well. With regards to the enforcement update, we've identified here certainly the process that's been involved, certainly the number of times that we went out this year. I know the 48 hours is in the bylaw, but from a practical point of view, certainly we weren't out after every 48 hour. I think our first enforcement was actually closer to 15 or 16 days in terms of the December period, holidays, weekends. And I should note that each time it snows, that resets the 48 hours from a ticket point of view. Once the ticket process starts, of course, and that enforcement process continues. But given even though the snow, we may not have had a huge amount of snow this year, the frequency of that snow certainly reset our calendars a lot of times, and certainly if we ran into weekends, we were not back out there until Monday or Tuesday. From a process point of view, it takes our 2 officers approximately 2 days, and we do cover every kilometer of road in town that has a sidewalk as part of that process. So each of these patrols that you see here did involve covering every aspect of the community. Again, in terms of the actual snowfall, it did say 1 inch before patrols were conducted. That's plus or minus, but we do rely on information from it's nice to have a weather station close to home, and every community has that option as well. In terms of the actual notice of motion, we have provided a bit of a response to the request. Certainly, if it's council's direction to go back to a warning process, we certainly can do that. That's just an added step into the process itself. So the $25, we're not really, if it's the goal of council to provide some caution or some pre-warning, then we'd recommend not even issuing, we'd simply go back to issuing a warning ticket. $25 certainly doesn't cover the cost of the actual enforcement process. In order to collect that, not really worth it. You may as well go back to just doing a warning. From a cleanup order, of course, once the city becomes aware of it as part of our proactive model, we are bound to deal with that. Otherwise, the city for sure, and possibly the adjacent landowner also runs into liability should there be an accident that comes about of that. So those are kind of 2 distinct issues when we are dealing with the sidewalk provision. So we have identified some of the alternatives. I want to back up 1 step. One area of enforcement that we did have some concern with, and certainly we did hear complaints from ticket holders, of course, and from people that did receive warnings. So we were expecting more, but we did receive some. We also still continue to hear complaints about that we weren't enforcing enough. A number of councillors probably heard those same concerns. And one of the areas that is concerning from a bylaw point of view is dealing with lane access points and driveways. We did treat both of those the same, and so they were not enforced to a degree that was probably adequate this year. We are looking at making that change for next winter, where we would put that expectation on. Now, I don't expect to see a whole lot of increase in tickets because of it. Because if you're doing your sidewalk, chances are you're already doing your driveway access. But in fairness to property owners, the city wasn't cleaning up their lane access points, so it wasn't deemed to be fair to be putting that same expectation on property owners. But they are certainly, because of the angle, as much a safety hazard as any other piece of sidewalk in town. And certainly we'll be looking at making those changes, or looking at from the city side of being able to, if not removing the snow, at least providing gravel to make sure that it's safe.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Councillor Connick, Councillor Kite, and Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Thank you, Michael, for this the information provided here. I want to start by saying most of the talking to people generally on the street or whatever, they have said it is much better this year. So I think the proactive steps that we've taken are working. There's fewer and fewer instances of sidewalks not being shoveled. So kudos to our bylaw officer for being on, our bylaw officers for being on top of that this year. I think they've done a good job. As far as the $25 warning fine goes, that was more of a just to get the ball rolling on this discussion. I'm not particularly tied to that change or whatever. The only thing I'd like to see that's maybe discussed or changed is the whole idea of, I like the $100 initial fine. There have been instances, there have been 4 instances where people have, I think we've all seen the 2 emails. I had one person come to see me at the shop, and then Mr. McQuestion had his issue as well. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between that initial fine and then how the work order is issued right away as well. And I don't know if there's room somehow where you get your $100 initial fine, but then a week later the work order is issued to clean it up. So that gives them a week for that fine to get through the mail, for them to get it, to say, hey, I got fined, what the heck happened here? I better go clean my sidewalk. Now, I know there will probably be still instances of snowfall during that week. You can't get around that, but the point is people know they got to shovel their sidewalks. And this $100 fine puts them on notice. And I don't have a problem with issuing the work order to get it cleaned up, but I think there should be some lag time. And I think the people I've talked to in those instances have said, I'm fine with the fine. I haven't got a problem. Yeah, that's fine, $100. They mostly have issues with that work order that's generated at exactly the same time. They're not given a chance to respond to the fine, if you will. I don't know, that's my thinking. If there's an area we can fix. As we've seen tonight, this, along with garbage, we're never going to get right. But I'm just suggesting that maybe this is something we can do. If not, so be it. But I'm just trying to address those instances that did come up this year with the new system. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kite.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I wanted to start by saying that I was very happily surprised when I went for my daily walk Saturday morning or Sunday morning, whenever we had the heavy snowfall, and all the sidewalks in my neighborhood were shoveled. I walked on pavement or sidewalk instead of snow, and so obviously the residents are embracing this policy. And the only place that wasn't shoveled are the city sidewalks, because we don't remove snow during weekends. So that was very nice to see as far as the residents taking onus. Commenting on Councillor Connick's thoughts, if we look at the examples that are given in his report as far as the last day of snowfall versus when the tickets were issued, in December and January, the residents had over a week to remove the snow before the ticket was issued. So to your comment about giving them a week before they already had a week. And so I think that's very generous. The only thing that I think we should have done differently, again, comes to communication. The enforcement update that we have in our memo here should have been in the paper, in the city's 2 pages that we do, and it should have been in a city utility newsletter before snow season started, so that everybody was informed and clear on the process before we started issuing tickets. That's the only issue I have. And we can't do anything about that now, but come next October, maybe we can make sure that that information goes out. And then everybody has had fair warning. and know what the process is. And hopefully then we will have happy citizens all around.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, then Councillor Creasy, then Councillor Redmond.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So everybody's asked the same question, but I didn't hear an answer from the question. So I'll ask it again because I'm not sure. What time is provided from the time of issuing the ticket before the contractor shows up? Because I heard different things, but if I'm going to get a ticket for not doing my sidewalk, that's one thing. But if by the time I get the ticket, the contractor's already there cleaning up, and I'm getting another $130 ticket, I'm not going to be happy. So I'm just wondering, and of course we're trying to be proactive, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to know, and the public needs to know, do we mail the ticket and a week later the contractor shows up? Is that kind of what I heard Ruben saying, or whatever?
So, just for clarification, when a ticket's issued, it's considered, the sidewalk's considered in non-compliance, and so the ticket is issued and the work order is issued immediately. The work doesn't necessarily take place right away, and that's where we've had some issues. But given the frequency, that's not really realistic either. But we are there typically clean within the next 2 to 3 days, depending on weather and workloads. So, I do go back to council for direction in terms of that's our proactive model. So, if council wants to go back to and issue a warning, then certainly we can do a warning and then say within 48 hours, if this is not clean, you're going to get ticketed, and we will issue the work order for an invoice as well. That's certainly a possibility. We want to get out of issuing multiple fines because this generates more paperwork and really not really solving the goal, but certainly a warning. And then subsequent events, what we do with other instances, if it happens a second time, we saw only 4 offenders in terms of repeats, there wouldn't be any warning, you get a ticket and a work order right away. But again, that's a service level, and we're just looking for direction from that standpoint.
Thanks, Michael. I guess I don't know what's reasonable. I guess if the ticket goes in the mail and the contractor is given that call, that everyone knows that there's some sort of a time frame. I don't know if that's reasonable or not. I don't know. But it seems right now is there's no warning that the ticket is given, and it's going to take a week, 3-4 business days until the time it gets there, and already the contractor could be out there and cleaned up. So, and yes, we need the sidewalk cleaned. Don't get me wrong on that either.
Yeah, and certainly it is. They are 2 separate forms of enforcement. We could just issue, I've been in municipalities where we just issue the cleanup order and no ticket. So there's any combinations here in terms of what level or what action you want to ensure compliance.
What I would like to see, we're there. The bylaw officer has to come back to the office to issue the ticket because that's where the information for the homeowner is found. He can't do it on site, but he's there. We can buy a roll of stickers, red stickers, that says you have been issued a ticket for not shoveling your sidewalk. You will be receiving it in the mail in the next 10 days. The contractor has been called and will be around to shovel your sidewalk in the next 3 days. If it's not done, you will be fined you will be charged the $150 for and just stick it right on this mailbox, stick it on their garage door. A red sticker, I come home to a red sticker saying I just got a $100 fine for not shoveling my sidewalk. I'm certainly not going to leave it for 3 more days for the contractor to show up. You know it's coming, because I believe in, and we hear it every day, why do we make bylaws if we don't enforce them? Why do we have 2 bylaw enforcement officers if they're not enforcing bylaws? That's what they're here to do. So I think that if we can stick a sticker on someone's garage door saying you got a ticket, and to avoid another one, shovel your sidewalk before the contractor shows up in 2 to 3 days. It makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to anybody else, but that would be my suggestion then they know right ahead. They know what's coming up. They know, and if our contractor shows up, and it's happened many times, where we have sent the contractor out to shovel walks, and they get there and it's done. so we don't get a bill for that, and consequently we don't send a bill out. So I think that is simple, it's easy. The bylaw officer is there anyways, because I certainly don't want to take a step back. It took us 6 years on council to get to a proactive place where we are now, and it's working. People are aware and people know. So to take a step back, I don't feel is correct, and that's my thoughts anyway. We are to Councillor Creasy.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I agree with the fact that the warning ticket is not economically feasible, and I'm glad to see that you've changed your mind on the sticker idea, because it wasn't received very well when I initially presented it with the door clasp or whatever. So the sticker thing, I think, is a great idea, because the biggest problem with this is the timing issue between you knowing that that you were a bad citizen, you didn't show your walk, and you get the ticket. Fine, you're guilty. That's tough luck. But then to incur the other additional charges for cleanup prior to knowing that you were not responsible is not acceptable. So I think that's a great solution, and I'm sure that we can have that in place for next season. Thanks.
Councillor Epple?
Thank you, Mayor Christie, and once again, someone stole my idea. But I was going to suggest, actually, instead of a sticker, some sort of door hanger that could go on the door, and now I was told that that was his idea, so I absolutely, to be serious now, I absolutely do agree with what's been suggested as far as when the bylaw officer's there, writes a ticket, gives them notice somehow, sticker, door hanger, whatever it is, so they know that that someone will be coming to clean it. If it is clean, they will not incur any more cost. If it isn't clean, they will have to pay for that. So I would support that 100% to go ahead with that sort of program.
I think Norman wants to chime in here.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I don't have a lot to add, just that as your program is currently structured, the invoice for cleaning will be issued immediately after the fine and will not be received. So there'll be a billing for both the fine and the invoice for cleanup before the homeowner becomes aware of that invoice for cleanup. So the sticker does resolve that, providing the homeowner reads it and acknowledges it. Then that notice can be given. As far as a warning, and there's been a lot of discussion around warnings, people have 48 hours after the snowfall to clean their sidewalks. That is the warning period. If you want to change that any further, then certainly it's your prerogative to do so, but they do need to clean up during that 48-hour period.
Thank you. I got Councillor Bousman and Councillor Connick.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I have a couple things to chime in with. I think we're understanding that there's an issue with process, that there needs to be some improvement, and I feel like as if we're coming to a good solution here. The reality still is that our citizens need to know what's going on, and if we don't have a good quote-unquote communication program to share that information with them, it's still going to be creating frustrated citizens. So do we need to look a little bit further, or does the administration need to look a little bit further on how the communication is done and to ensure that it is adequate? We all know that it doesn't take very much to throw in an extra little piece of paper with your utility bill, even if it has to happen in October and November and December. Just as a reminder, this is what you're obligated to do, and then we don't have to have citizens coming back to us and say, well, we never heard about it. Well, we can't spoon feed, and I realize that, but at least we should do our best to educate our citizens on this matter. And guess what? It has to be done every year.
Thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I wholeheartedly endorse your idea. I think it's a terrific idea. Whether the sticker idea was yours first or someone else's, I think is irrelevant, but I think it's a great idea. So I'm glad, and one of the things I enjoy about this council is at the end of the day, we always seem to come up with a compromise, and I think we've done it again. I think that's, speaks volumes for us, and I think that's a terrific idea. The only suggestion I'd like to make going forward is that bylaw, when they're on these streets, just make sure they park the right way. I've heard instances where they park the wrong way, facing, and that, they'll go issue tickets, and then they'll issue a ticket for somebody parking the wrong way on the street when they've done it themselves. So maybe just caution them that going forward, that they park correctly on the streets, because there's been some incidents of that as well. Thank you.
Well, once again, I'm gonna say that nobody can say I don't let you guys talk. I think we're looking for some sort of direction for administration in the way of a motion. Or have you got the gist of it? And
Well, there's a notice of motion before you, so I guess that should be dealt with.
Yeah.
The proposed changes tonight don't require any bylaw changes, and we can do those administratively, but certainly from a procedural point of view, you should do a notice of motion.
To that then, can I withdraw the notice of motion, or do we just, I still have to throw it out there and we vote on it? How does that work? No,
no, just make a motion.
Okay, well, I'll make that motion again, I guess.
That didn't sound like we were changing the current protocols. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. I believe the protocols as they are will remain in place. It just sounds like we're gonna make that sticker dealie or whatever, so that sounds. Well, that's not my motion. The motion was the first warning offense, but is that the motion I'm making, or am I making a revised motion?
Councillor Koenig, you can certainly make a motion of your choice. It doesn't have to follow exactly your notice of motion.
I would so move that council continue with the current protocols as it applies to sidewalk cleaning within the city of Lacombe, with the addition of a warning sticker applied to the property owner at the time.
We don't need to put that in.
Well, I see, I'm just trying to, you asked me.
Gonna find the property owner.
No, okay, no. The issuance of a sticker on the offending property, letting them know that a fine has been issued and a subsequent work order will be followed if the sidewalk isn't cleaned.
Thank you. Director Mitchell, did you?
If it pleases Councillor Koenig, I would recommend that the sticker be replaced with a notification.
Notification. Thank you very much.
It's not allowed for door hangers as per council.
A notification of some sort, thank you. Any further questions on that? I have one question with regards to, we speak to, we don't do patrols, the minimum snowfall is 1 inch before patrols are conducted. So, and it resets the clock if there's another snowfall. Does it have to be 1 inch before it resets that clock? Because if we have 2 inches of snow, and then it snows 1/16 of an inch the next night, does it reset that clock?
To Mayor Christie, it doesn't reset. If we suddenly now have 3 inches of snow, then we're certainly out there doing issuing notices and fines.
You bet. Thank you very much. Any further questions, discussion? All those in favor of the motion? So carried. And Ruben, I think, I have to disagree with you a little bit, and I think with enough information and enough input, I think we can do it right. We'll keep working at it. Thank you guys and thanks Ruben for bringing that back and for working through that. Local improvement bylaw 3.6, local tax bylaw relining sanitary sewer services. Director Mitchell.
So this is related to 49th Ave sewer service lighting. So this work was done last year, 2012. Bylaw before you tonight is actually the bylaw required to be able to levy the tax against the properties. So we're hoping for first reading tonight. That this is a little more convoluted than normally would be, just because we are contributing over 50% of the value of the local improvement. That's due to, in part to some higher than expected costs on the city side, and for our share. Plus, there were a number of exempt properties because they had already undertaken the local improvement themselves. The city's picking up that share as opposed to splitting that cost across the remaining property owners. So you will see a notice in the paper this week about this local improvement, and that's a requirement in the Act. But for all intents and purposes, we'll be sending out letters here in the next few weeks to the property owners.
Thank you, Director Minchin. This is basically a housekeeping item, is it not? The work is already completed. This is not for new work coming up. The work is done. Councillor Foster, Councillor Creasy, then Councillor Bosma.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So I'm just trying to understand why this is being done at this point, Michael. Is this not a blanket bylaw?
So just to walk council through the steps of a local improvement, prior to, I believe in 2011, you issued what's called a local improvement plan, which creates the opportunity for local improvement. Because this was sewer, this was not a petitionable bylaw, but you did, owners were still required under the Act to be notified. So we did go through those notifications. The work was completed in 2012, at which point we then create what's called a local improvement tax. So this is a levy specific to this work that applies specifically to these 25 properties now. We then send out notification letters. They have the opportunity to prepay within the next 30 days, and then we otherwise we issue tax notices.
Thank you. So this is done each time that we have, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor Creasy, then Councillor Bosma.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. In the actual bylaw itself, on about the fourth whereas, it states so on the second last whereas on page 105, it goes through the city of Lacombe at large benefiting owners, and then below that it says the local improvement tax will be collected for 10 years and the total amount levied annually against the benefiting homeowners, or benefiting owners rather, is $7,543.
Annually, yes.
For the 25 owners at the site.
Yeah, but the total amount isn't levied annually.
Per year.
I don't think the wording, they're not paying $75,000, they're paying $7,500 total. This says it's levied annually.
So the 75, it is 75, and that's for all the owners. Over how many years? Oh, over 10 years.
If you look a little bit closer on the chart, you'll indicate that a homeowner, as I understand it, has two choices. One is a lump sum payment of $2,677, or they can go to a yearly payment amount of $301.75. If you multiply 25 properties at $301.75 equals $7,543.75. I have no idea why that is exactly put in the bylaw as it is, because some property owners may go with the lump sum, some property owners may go with the monthly amount.
So what this bylaw is authorizing is we are able to levy on an annual basis $7,500 over the next 10 years, subject to whatever owner may prepay now, and it's even more convoluted, or who may prepay the balance in the future. You're actually able to pay off the balance of the original local improvement at any time. Okay.
So I guess back to my original question then, is the wording there still doesn't make sense to me. Is a portion of that 7,500 isn't 7,500 annually that's levied against each homeowner?
Not each homeowner, it's the entire levy.
That's the entire levy.
Okay. So, okay. thank you. And so in fact, the prepayment amount is an amount in full for the, because those numbers add up to 66,900 change, whatever. And it says that the 50% of the 214,000, how does that, I don't follow the math.
Right, so the original local improvement plan called for 50% of it. I think it was 228, I think was the original budget. We came in, the overall project's under budget, but because a number of the owners are now exempt, and because part of our cost is actually higher than originally budgeted, it's actually more than the 50. We're picking up more than 50% of the overall local improvement.
Okay, that certainly explains it then. The math wasn't wrong. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the remainder of that, when it talks about the annually against the benefiting all the owners, that's where it ties into the 7,500. So I know I can go over that a couple times too.
Thank you for that. I read it as each of the benefiting landowners. That would be a portion of it, so that, yeah, it didn't make sense. So thanks for that clarification as well. Okay.
Councillor Rosman?
Just as a point of clarification here as well, we're saying that the total cost was 214,820. 50% is obligated to be paid for by the city.
Good evening. We will call to order the April 22nd, 2013 regular council meeting for the city of Lacombe at 5:03 p.m. The agenda is before you. Any additions or deletions? Councillor Kite?
Also, move that we'll accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? So carried. Thank you. The minutes for April 8th, 2013 regular meeting are there before you. Any errors or omissions? Questions? Councillor Rempel?
I'll move that we accept the minutes for April 8th, 2013 regular meeting.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? So carried. Council mailbox, there's 5 items there. Any discussion, questions? Concerns? Councillor Foster?
Move that we adopt the council mailbox as presented.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? So carried. Thank you. Public hearings, presentations, the 2012 audited financial statements, a report, and Dan Linus is here, and Al Lister. Al, thanks, fellas. The floor is yours, and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
If we can just get you to use the mic there. Just on the side, there should be a button on the side. Okay, now push the one up front. Okay, now push the one on the side again. There we go. You almost had it.
We're better with numbers.
Andrew will just pop over.
Really sort of the important part of the audit is basically dictates how the municipality or how the city actually performed according to the budget. The first thing to note is that the budget numbers under the expense side of things actually incorporate amortization. So amortization is basically the use of your capital assets over time. It's an item that is not budgeted for in your budget. It's included in the budget numbers because it's included in the actual expenses. So if you don't include it in the budget, you can't compare apples to apples. So now if you look at the expenses, the budget is 22.9 million, you can see your actuals are 22.8. So $100,000 plus or minus on the actual to budget analysis is not too bad. And if you look on it on a department by department basis, you actually see no major swings in actual to budget in any of the departments as well. This is as expected because we expect basically the city to match budget. If you go up top to the grants, you'll see a little bit more, to the income statement side, you'll see a little bit more variances from budget. Primarily, it's in government transfers, which you'll see the detail on in Schedule 3. It's 20 million versus 15 million. This is specifically tied to the timing of capital projects. That's the simplest way to put it. So if you don't complete something, you're not going to recognize the related grant revenue for it. And the reason it doesn't affect your expenses below the line is that capital expenses are not shown below the line. Those are only operational expenses. Any question on the statement of operations?
Councillor Creasy?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Dan, I was just curious what the discrepancy is on the expense side for recreation and cultural services. There, about $500,000 between the budget and the actual for 12.
So the first thing is which, are you looking at the version that you received over the weekend? The draft statement?
Listening to the one that's online.
Yeah, because the one that was on the weekend, we hadn't accounted for amortization yet in the budget line. There's about 600 grand in amortization inside of recreation. So the first draft did not have those. The paper copy should have the amortization calculation.
Everybody's got a hard copy there? We can follow along with that. Councillor Fox?
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So is this hard copy, we have a draft copy?
Yes.
Okay, it's not stamped draft, nor is the name of the firm on it. I was just curious why that was the case.
We're basically tying in the last bit of numbers. We don't expect the statements to change materially from these. Normally, mechanically, what's supposed to happen with all municipalities and all audits is draft statements are presented to any entity, and then after it's approved or these statements are taken by the management, then the final statements are normally issued at that point in time. So it's mechanics at this point. The numbers aren't going to change.
I think the plan is to have everything finalized up this week. There's a few minor things we gotta follow up with from the file, and other than that, there's no number changes anticipated. So these, in essence, are the final numbers as far as things go.
Thank you. And the name on the page?
Oh, as far as the firm? Oh, BDO Canada.
It's not listed anywhere. Why
Nope, absolutely. It'll be on the report itself. You'll have our letterhead on there as well, on the final part. So.
Thank you.
I'll touch on note 13 just to.
Alright, so we'll jump to note 13, which is page 21, the last page of the printed financial statements. This does show you how the budget that's presented on the statement of operations reconciles to the budget that is presented and approved by council. So it shows you your net income on the face of the statements, and it flows it back through for all the other items that you budget for, but because of the presentation that's required in these financial statements, has to basically be pulled out. You budget for these things appropriately. It's just not how the disclosure works under public sector accounting standards.
Yeah, the column on the left shows the balanced budget itself. If you work your way from the top to the bottom, the statement of operations, the surplus, that 18.357 million, that's the one number you can tie into your financial statement of operations. And as you work your way down, the adjustments for things like non-cash items like amortization, then you're adding in your cash items for capital acquisitions and so on and so forth. And as you go through the calculations, you can see the balance budgets there. And like Dan was mentioning before, the reason why we have amortization in there is now you can compare apples to apples from actual to budget as we work through the statements as well.
Yeah, so amortization wouldn't be such a problem like that, except that you have to allocate it to departments. So you can see it nicely here as a one-line item, but as soon as you start hitting multiple departments with that amount, you start distorting the actual budget on a department by department basis quite a bit if you exclude it from the budget line. So any questions on note 13?
There you go.
So that's sort of the income statement is really where a lot of the stuff happens. Note 13 really shows a net operating surplus of about 100 grand. This is after the budget or after reserve transfers that have already been booked. So really, you're not left with a whole lot extra in the pot above and beyond your reserve transfers. Now, we had budgeted for transfers from reserves, so that'll be transfers from reserves into your operating or capital fund. That was budgeted at 3.1 million. We only actually transferred in 2.4, so really current period operations and the capital side saved itself 700 grand either through cost savings or through just not undertaking those capital projects, and it's more likely the latter. If you go look at the balance sheet from our perspective, what we normally do is we just compare from 2012 to 2011. So I'm looking at page 2, consolidated statement of financial position. And from an audit perspective, like I said, we're looking for things that are quite a bit different from year to year. One thing that jumps out is the land held for resale inventory. Well, council should be aware of the basically purchasing the lot for resale by the railroad tracks there. That was about 1.6 million, which accounts for the entire increase in that amount. When you're looking at receivables and payables, you can see that they're about the same, like $1 million difference. Specifically, it's timing, right? If you don't get the invoices or you don't invoice people right on the dot, and if they don't pay you right away, you are going to have timing differences between your receivables and payables. So those are all reasonable. And deposit liabilities, it hasn't gone up a whole lot. The deferred revenue, this is as expected. This amount should drop even more very quickly for 2013 if we start completing a lot of our capital projects. And the debt is your regular principal repayment. So you can see that deferred revenue has decreased by around 3 million, and our capital assets have gone up by around 13 million. While we are completing the 2A project. So it's going to have a major hit on your financial statements until that thing is done. And that's sort of the balance sheet and the income statement. The statement of change in net debt and the statement of change of cash flows, I really look at it as reconciliation tools to make sure that everything's being picked up appropriately. Statement of cash flows does tell you where your money went, and it does give you a bit of comparison. So you can see on page 5, consolidated statement of cash flows, capital activities, we spent 16 million, and last year we spent 10. And if you jump back to the statement of change in net financial assets or debt, that's page 4. Well, we budgeted to spend 21 million in capital, so there's still a little bit more capital to go. That's how I approach the statement of cash flows. I look at them to make sure, are these amounts balancing to the cash items? One thing to point out on the statement of cash flows, though, is there's $14.2 million on the balance sheet. That's cash. If you go to note 2, and actually you'll see the tie-in to the statement of cash flows, but note 2 on page 14 shows that you have 14.2 million. 11 million isn't really yours. Well, it sort of is. You've been told how you can spend it. So you really only have, at the end of the day, the $3 million sort of available for your own use. And that $3 million is going to be meant to fund your current liabilities. Right? So a lot of it is sort of already tied up depending on what your payables and receivable situation is. So it looks real good, but once you factor in that most of this is allocated to capital projects, and you've been told what capital projects are tied to, don't go on a spending spree. That's, I guess, the punchline. I think that's about where I want to wrap up our presentation. It touches on the high level items, balance sheet, income statement. Any questions? Alan, anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I think we covered that main stuff.
Councillor Creasy?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Just curious with the tangible capital assets. I don't know if the page numbers are the same in the old meeting, but on page 4. Is it just a timing issue between the budgeted and the 2012 current for the $5.5 million, $5.25 million difference?
That was probably easier to speak to if Michael, if I can throw you under the bus, give you that one. And a lot of it is just whether you've actually undertaken that capital project or not, right? So we're looking at the page 4, standard change in net financial assets. We budgeted to acquire about 21 million in capital. We only acquired 16.
So yes, that primarily relies on 2 projects. Highway 2A, of course, is actually working itself under budget, as well as there's still about $3 million that was carried over into 2013, which wasn't expected. As well, the other project is the Brun Storm Pond, which was carried over. The vast majority of that expense was carried over into 2013 as well.
Okay, and then where's the line item that would reflect the actual cost for acquiring those on the expense side?
So on the expense, the simplest place to go, I normally go to the schedule of tangible capital assets, which is sort of your page 6, schedule 1. So this shows you what you bought, what pots it all went in. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you can see here that we have 5.7 million in engineered structures, 8.3 million in assets under construction. That's 13 out of the 17. Out of that 17, there is $1 million in land. So the land actually includes a contributed asset. So this is all the municipal reserve that's being contributed by developers. So that's $1 million of asset that's added to the city books, but the city doesn't have to pay anything for it. It's part of those development agreements. So you look at the 17 million, you yank off the 1 million and change, you're down to the 16 million in additions. Most of it's tied to 5.76 million in engineered structures and another 8 in assets under construction. So there's your 15, or basically your big projects. The assets under construction, most of that is that Highway 2A project that's still ongoing. And the idea is that, yes, you're ready for use, people can drive on it, but it's not done yet. So you're waiting for it to be completed, and then once it's completed, it's going to move from there to the engineered structures pot, or group of assets, if you will. Does that?
So yeah, no, that makes sense. But so in the 16.268 million on the cash flow sheet, then how do we arrive at that from the schedule 1?
Okay, so you take that 17,316,840, and actually it might even be easier to work backwards. You take the 16,268,311, which is your acquisition of the capital assets, and then you add in the 1,048,530.
We're just breaking out the contributed part of it.
Yeah, because you don't pay any cash for it, right? You pay 16.2 million in cash for the acquisition.
Thank you for that, because I looked at these for quite some time and I couldn't figure out how to do it, so that makes it easier. Thanks.
Any questions from council? Councillor Creasy?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. The other one I had was there was a significant increase in employee contributions from last year, and
so
like I think double. And what do we attribute that to? Okay, I think it was perhaps pension related, but that seems like a fairly substantial increase from one year to the next.
So, I guess which specifically are you looking at? Are you looking at employee benefit obligations note 4? Is that where you're looking on the balance sheet side, or are you looking at the at this note here?
Is the figure double from last year?
No.
Then it's a different one.
Just thinking out loud, were you looking at note 12, the employee pension plans?
Well, it must have been the contributions.
Which would have had the contributions from the city and the contributions from the. Okay, so what happened there is the earlier draft you had was not updated correctly with the correct 2011 comparatives.
Yeah.
So the one that's on screen should have about 630,000 as the city contribution for 2012 versus 560 for 2011. So the earlier version was not correctly updated for the 2011 comparative, because the original 11 comparative on the statement was about 330, 340, which
That was
which
2010.
yeah, which wasn't correct. So it was corrected when we got to the final draft. Does that answer your question? Is that what you were looking for, I guess?
I think it does. I guess just as a point of clarity here, I'm curious as to why we were presented with one set of numbers and then over the weekend they change. In future years, perhaps we could get it right the first time, because for those of us that don't work with these every day, it's confusing enough as it is. And I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with the numbers. It's just why two of them? Let's either wait for another week or two and do it right the first time.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Creasy. The statements were placed on your agenda on Friday so that you would have access to the information. There were some updates made by the auditors over the weekend, and we wanted this information to be before you this evening so that we could ensure that the audited financial statements were submitted to Municipal Affairs by the May 1st deadline. We do have that deadline to work with, and we certainly didn't want to ask for an extension this year, but certainly it's understood that when the information changes, it certainly makes for additional work for you as council.
Thank you. Any further questions, discussion? Councillor Kite?
Thank you, Mayor Chris. Just a comment to the comment. Perhaps if we need to have changes to the printed copy, it could be colored, and then we know right away where the changes were made.
Thank you. Anything further? Down now. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming out this evening. Bringing this to us.
Thank you very much for your time.
Have a good evening. Right, before we get into the business,
that we undertake, or get pricing to undertake an HVAC assessment of the building, see if there's upgrades required in that area as well, and look at doing some of the recommended low maintenance repairs at the same time. So we have requested pricing and received pricing for both of those items. The upgrades to the HVAC, that assessment would be $10,800, and the other upgrades are about $35,000, covering almost all the recommended items from Stantec that they had in their report. The only thing that we have recommended not to go ahead with, and it wasn't recommended in the original report, it was just a pricing that we had requested, was a floor replacement of all the windows on the building. We just don't see that as a need at this time. It's not justify that price. So we asked council to endorse the further $45,409 of work to undertake an HVAC assessment and expand the scope of repairs of the existing building. If there's questions, I can answer those.
thank you, Councillor Connick, Councillor Belsma, then Councillor Creasy.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Just a point of clarification, in our budget adjustment, we're asking for 81,000 and now we have 46. Am I missing something? Okay, so why is 181 and this is 46?
Eric mentioned the difference being the siding that you've already approved previously.
Councillor Braswell?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I appreciate seeing these different items to help address the issues at this particular building. The window replacement item, I totally agree in deferring that particular one. If we are able to address HVAC issues as well as our exterior envelope issues, that a good chunk of that the issues with condensation buildup on the windows may disappear anyway. So unless the windows are in really poor condition, I think it's a good test situation where we can find out if our new methods and our renovations that are going to happen are going to take care of the condensation, and if they are, that window replacement may be able to be delayed for some time.
Thank you. Councillor Creasy?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I could direct my question to Matt as far as the low slope roof repairs. Obviously, there's some portions of roof that are not done standing seam on the low slope. That's a different item. There's two different types of roofing in that particular part of the building.
There is, yes.
Okay, that makes that easy. As far as the control of moisture within the building, I guess that's the reason why I also brought it up once before with the contractor who's got a pretty good track record in heating issues, and especially good track record for removing moisture from buildings of this type with high moisture contents, riding arenas and that kind of thing. I would suggest that we contact Janssen Energy Technology Inc. and for some input from them as well prior to doing the engineering. I think that he's got both a good engineering understanding plus a proven track record in the field as well, and I would like to see what he proposes to make the entire system more effective than what it was initially designed to be. I think we can realize some savings there as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? You're looking for approval of the extra expenditures tonight, Mr. Gowdy, I'm sure. Councillor Connick?
I also move that council direct administration to accept the additional scope of work at a cost of $34,609 and enter into a contract with Stantec Consulting for the HVAC assessment at a cost of $10,800.
Thank you. Councillor Creasy?
Thank you once again, Mayor. So, first off, I'd just like for us to consider removing the HVAC assessment portion because I don't think it was going to come to any surprise to anyone here. It shouldn't. That when the assessment comes back, it's going to recommend the use of a dehumidifier, which is certainly one way, but it's going to be a very costly item in magnitude of $300,000–400,000. It's going to be expensive. And I would suggest that we get some additional information, like I said, from an individual who's got a proven track record and a tremendous amount of experience in these types of issues. So I would like to see that we make this recommendation that we remove the HVAC assessment portion for the $10,800 this time.
Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So, Councillor Creasy, are you saying instead of this $10,800 done by Stantec, that we have somebody else do it for the same?
Don't cost anything.
Cost or
zero.
What kind of cost would we? I mean, we're going to incur a cost, but it's the same. Are you talking about the same process, just somebody different?
I'm talking about somewhat of a similar process, but we're removing the $10,800 altogether because I think you'll find that that's not required. And, this individual's been contacted on other items, city-related items as far as boilers and whatnot, and has a tremendous amount of experience in this field, would like to do, gratis.
Well, I mean, why would we spend 10.8 if you're saying that this individual's got the credentials and can tell us
awesome.
whether we need it or not, yeah, it certainly makes sense to me.
Councillor Renfro?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I just want to make sure I understand this as well. If we take that out, we don't have anything in there to do an assessment, but you're saying you will do it for free?
Yes, you will.
No, I don't know that for sure, but if it'll make you happier, then take the 10,000 out and leave 800 in, that should cover it.
Okay, Councillor Cates?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. To Director Gowdy. So what kind of process did you go through to figure out that it should be Stantec who should do this assessment? I'm sure you looked at other alternatives before you came to this conclusion, unless it's outrageous that it all goes to our engineering firm.
We do have a general engineering services agreement with Stantec, so they are our first contact for proposals for this sort of work that are well below our purchasing limits threshold wise. So they have provided this proposed scope of work for the HVAC assessment that we requested. We haven't discussed anything with the contractor that Councillor Creasy has indicated, but we can certainly touch base with them.
Councillor Connick, Councillor Bausman, then Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I think it's imperative that the HVAC assessment stay in there. I think we had discussed 2 weeks ago when we looked at this, that the point of doing these renovations and work was to fix this problem, but we want to make sure that there was going to be no further issues, and it was imperative that we do an HVAC assessment to find the levels of humidity, find out what the problem is, find out where this moisture is going, if it's not being properly vented or whatever the case may be. I don't think it's within the scope of services. I don't think it's Stantec could certainly consult Janssen Engineering and have a discussion with them and use that as maybe one of their options and recommendations. So that's well within the scope of the assessment for them to do that.
Wow. Did you want to speak to that, Mr. County?
Actually, I just wanted to make one quick comment to Councillor Kite's question. The other reason that we automatically went to Stantec on this item is they had previously done the assessment of the building and what had caused the moisture problems, so we thought that they would be well suited to continue doing work.
Councillor Bausman?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I don't have a huge problem delaying a decision on the HVAC assessment, or at least the cost and definitely going towards Stantec. I am only somewhat familiar with this firm that Councillor Creasy is referring to. He was in my office a few weeks ago. As far as I know, he's not an engineer. And I think if we want to even decide to consider him, that we first need to go through a quote-unquote qualification process to make sure that he does have the proper qualifications and experience in order for us to use him, free or not free. So I think it would be appropriate that we go through that process, and if we need to delay the decision on the HVAC assessment until our May 13th meeting, that suits me just fine.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So perhaps to allow Matt some time and opportunity to investigate this, if we simply made a friendly amendment to leave Stantec Consulting out of it, leave the amount in, and if it comes back at way less than, and we use somebody different, so be it. But at least Matt can have an opportunity to proceed with knowing that we have to do some sort of assessment, whether it be with one firm or another.
Thank you. Councillor Connick, you're the mover.
Sure, we can remove that, but I think, like I said, we need to do this at some point, so, I mean, it's imperative to get a handle on this building and issues this committee, so.
Councillor Kite?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I just need clarification on process. So if we do not use our engineer who we have a contract with, do we not need to put it into some kind of open something instead of just going to one company and show their rates in that way?
Certainly, Councillor Kite, yes, it is advisable that, so we're not using the engineer we have a services agreement with. We'd open this to others, including the recommended engineer by Councillor Creasy.
At no time did I say that individual was an engineer. I say he's an individual with a lot more experience than this engineering firm that we deal with or any other. Practical, real world experience that works. That's the reason I suggested it. Not because he has a beaver ring. I don't have anything against him, but this is one of those issues that is not cut and dried as a good number of engineering fields are. And I think that proven field experience in this particular realm is more valuable than the design papers.
Thank you. So Councillor Connick, did you want to, where's your motion at right now?
Well, I'm amenable to a friendly amendment to exclude the contract with Stantec Consulting for the HVAC assessment at $10,800.
If I could, just to leave Stantec Engineering out of it, that allows Matt to do his investigation as to who it's going to be. But we know that we have to have some sort of investigation, call it an HVAC, call it whatever assessment, right? That's all I was getting at, was trying to keep it so we can proceed.
Councillor Valsma?
Are we going to delay this process quite substantially going through this? Because if we need to go through I mean, and this is only appropriate, as Councillor Kite mentioned, if we are not going to go with the company that we have a contract with, then we have to open it up, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks is not going to be sufficient for us to come up with in all probability, not sufficient to come up with a proper assessment of fees for this area.
CEO McQuarrie?
To Councillor Bosma, that is correct. I have also heard that you would like to see the individuals go through a qualifying process, the individuals who would actually be considered. So that's going to extend the timeline out that much further, if in fact that is what you're asking for.
Who cares? Who's in a rush?
So, thanks, Mayor Christie. Where in our contract with them does it say that we have to send every single thing through that company? Surely you must have a limit.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Creasy. There's nothing that states we have to send all engineering, City of Lacombe engineering through Stantec Consulting.
Thank you.
Director Gowdy?
I guess I'm a little bit unclear. We're talking about engineering studies, and then we're talking about non-engineering studies. Are we asking then for, if Stantec is removed, are we asking for an engineering study, which it sounds like would disqualify the contract we've been discussing? Are we asking for a non-engineering study, which will open up to this contractor and I'm sure many others? Those two are going to be priced very different, I would say. So if the decision is to remove Stantec, I guess I'd like some clarification on whether it's an engineering study or whether it's
I guess it was my impression that we were after a viable solution.
Thank you. Councillor Connick?
All right, you know what, just leave the motion as is.
Which is?
What I read initially.
I'm sorry?
That council direct administration accept the additional scope of work at a cost of $34,609 and enter into contract with Stantec Consulting for the HVAC assessment at a cost of $10,800. That was my initial motion.
All right, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? So carried. Thank you. Snow removal, invoice deal. CEO McCordy.
Thank you. Mayor Christie, before you this evening, Council, is a follow-up memorandum to an appeal that was made at your last regular meeting on April 8th. The appeal came from a Lacombe resident, Mr. McQuestion, was before you appealing the snow removal invoice that was forwarded to his home address. And his appeal was premised on the dates that were provided in terms of the issuance of a fine and then the subsequent issuance of an invoice for the snow removal by contract. At the meeting, at your last regular meeting, it was indicated that in accordance with certainly the Lacombe's traffic bylaw, the city has the ability to issue an invoice for snow removal via contracted service, so that is identified within your bylaw. And the dates that were given, the actual fine that was issued for this offense was issued on the 9th of January at 2:12 p.m. And the section, of course, that was issued under was 405 of the traffic bylaw. Subsequent to that, the cleanup order was issued to the contractor, and the contractor was on site at 5701 56th Avenue to remove the snow on January the 11th. Now, because I was in conversation with Mr. McQuestion myself, I had contacted our contractor and asked when the removal had taken place. And initially, I was given a date, and erroneously, I was given a date of January 9th. January 9th was, in fact, the date that the fine was issued. January 11th was the date that the snow removal occurred, and the invoice was subsequently mailed to Ms. McQuestion thereafter. So the photographs attached to your memorandum were taken at 2:12 p.m. on January 9th, 2013, the date of issue of the fine. I just wanted to, there's also a memorandum that speaks to the process in terms of snow and ice removal on public walkways. So just to, and this has been discussed previously, certainly, just to highlight our enforcement department will go out and proactively patrol and identify any offending properties. They'll return, the fines that they send out or that they issue, they use the utilities database to identify owners and address, match those with addresses, and also to subsequently mail out invoices, snow removal invoices. The other thing I'll just highlight for you is that there hadn't been any, of course, notification after the fine was issued that an invoice, subsequent invoice would be mailed or issued. So that process will change, whereby after the fine is issued, the offenders will be notified that the cleanup order has been sent, and that there will be a subsequent invoice if the sidewalk is not cleared. Also important for you to note that during the last snow season, if you will, there were a number of proactive patrols, but none of these proactive patrols occurred any earlier, and in fact, none occurred at the 48-hour mark after a snowfall. Snowfall is deemed to be 1 inch of snow or more. So homeowners did have ample opportunity to clear their public walkways of snow. We also issued 86 warning notices on October 31st before we started to actively enforce and issue fines. In the case of Mr. McQuestion, he did appeal the invoice, the cleanup invoice. I reassure council that the fine that was issued, there had the last recorded snowfall before the fine was issued was on, December 23rd, 2012. And fines were issued on January 7th, 8th, and 9th in follow-up to that. So certainly with the recorded information that we have, the City of Lacombe has retained on file, and further discussions with the contractor, the recommendation is that the invoice not, the appeal not be honored, and that the invoice remain payable to the City of Lacombe. Thank you.
Councillor Boswell?
Thanks very much for that information, and as I recall, and I'm hoping others in this room will remember as well, when Mr. McQuestion talked to us about that particular invoice, he indicated that there was another snowfall that happened in the evening of January 9th that extended through January 10th, and he had the Environment Canada information to note that. In effect, what he said is that yes, he was at fault and he did pay the violation ticket for the January 9th occurrence, but the actual cleanup, he technically had 48 hours because there was more snow that had fallen. So, and that hasn't been addressed in this particular adjusted memo. And if that is the case, then that may actually nullify his invoice.
To Councillor Bosma, the 48-hour period takes effect after a snowfall, until which time a fine is issued. There is no 48-hour period that applies to the issuance of a cleanup invoice. So the 48-hour period is specific to the issuance of a fine after a snowfall. And that is correct, that it did snow between the time the fine was issued and the cleanup occurred. However, the 48-hour period is not relevant to that period. It's only relevant to the issuance of a fine.
Councillor Connick, then Councillor Kite.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, he doesn't have a leg to stand on. It snowed December 23rd. 2 weeks later, he hadn't cleaned his sidewalk. It's irrelevant if it snowed 4 hours later after the picture was taken. Up until that point, he hadn't done it. And that the fine was issued for that snowfall, not one that occurred that night. You know? I know the fine was paid, but the point is it was issued because of the December 23rd snowfall. 2 weeks later, he had not removed the snow.
Councillor Kite and Councillor Rempel.
Thank you. That was exactly my point. He had 17 days to remove the snow and it wasn't done.
Councillor Rempel.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Just a question for clarification. I as well kind of agree that to me it looks like he had ample time, but if the fine was issued on the 9th, how do we know that he actually didn't clear his sidewalk if we got more snow after the 9th and they only came on the 11th? Could he have cleared his sidewalk on the evening of the 9th, and the snow that they cleared off was the snow from the 10th? Just a question. I just want to, it doesn't, do we know if it was cleaned up before it snowed again?
To Councillor Rempel, we do not know with certainty. What we know is that when the contractor arrived on site on the 11th, that the sidewalk had not been cleared, and they proceeded to clear the sidewalk of snow and ice.
Councillor Christie.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I guess it would be interesting to see if we would have the same photo on the 12th if the entire block was clean, because I find it odd that as you zoom in down this block, every single one's the same. Does that suggest that the entire block was issued tickets for this particular offense, or on this particular date? I mean, while I can see it's not cleaned down to the cement because of that one little area that's scraped off, and that's plain. But there's not like it's a walking hazard, or you can't walk through because of the snow pile. Like, I mean, it looks like to me it's a quarter-inch high of packed down snow.
To Councillor Creasy, I don't have the detail in terms of the fines that were issued on that particular date. I can certainly gather that information. In terms of when fines are issued, it's at the discretion of enforcement services when they're out doing their proactive patrol. And if they feel that the public walkways have not been cleared of snow adequately, then they have been given the ability to issue fines. So they certainly try and find that balance in terms of issuing. We're not out there issuing fines for the sake of issuing fines, and I reassure you of that. However, it is at their discretion should they deem that the walkway hasn't been cleared appropriately.
Thank you for that, CEO. I guess for future, I just would like to be assured that in a situation like this, it's not like we're just picking randomly one property owner over another, that's all. But just in general, not for this particular case.
That's correct, Mayor Christie.
I will make a motion that we maintain the violation ticket, and the cleanup ticket as was given to the president.
If I can just clarify for council, this discussion is around the cleanup invoice. The fine was paid, so this is strictly the cleanup invoice that was issued subsequent to the fine being issued.
Thank you. Councillor Belsma?
I do feel that it would be appropriate for us to talk to our bylaw officer in terms of the other residents on the street and whether or not there were fines issued for those ones as well. Because this picture, I don't think, tells a lie in that neighboring properties have the same situation. And I certainly hope they didn't just select one resident and not others.
CEO McQuarrie?
To Councillor Bosma, I certainly can confirm that there were other fines issued for residents on this street that day. I can't confirm exact addresses, but there were other residents that were fined on that date on this street.
Director Minchin?
And I can confirm there's substantial invoices issued as well. So this was one of the smaller of the invoices that was invoiced for that walk.
All right, the motion's there before you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. C4, Committee, Performing Arts and Children Facility. CEO McQuarrie.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. This item is before council tonight, recommending that council enter into negotiations with the Wolf Creek School Division regarding land that's owned by Wolf Creek School Division for the proposed purpose of a performing arts center and childcare facility. There's been a recent presentation to council from a number of childcare organizations in the community and the performing arts group, the C4 committee, indicating that they are working together cooperatively in terms of the feasibility of developing a facility that would house their programs. Wolf Creek School Division has provided a letter of intent that they are willing to discuss the use of land and for this particular project, and that they would like to enter into negotiations with the city of Lacombe. Some of the conditions that regarding discussions that they have imposed, of course everything will be done without prejudice, and any agreements will be formal in nature. That discussions will be kept confidential. However, any information pertaining to those discussions need to be approved by the affected parties, so Wolf Creek School Division being one and the City of Lacombe Council being the second stakeholder. And the discussion essentially will address the means by which the lands for the subject property will be used or potentially used, and that any cost will be borne by the respective stakeholder. The recommendation from administration is that we would agree to enter into those discussions with the school division. That we would also at the presentation from the C4 committee, a request was made that the city provide a letter of intent to hold 1.04 acres in abeyance for a 2-year period, and that would allow them to undertake the necessary research and investigation into the development of such a facility. So the recommendation would be that council would provide that particular letter of intent to hold that land in abeyance, that land that is owned by the City of Lacombe, and that the CAO would represent the city in terms of the negotiations that would pursue. So those are the recommendations before you this evening for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Kite and Councillor Creasy.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I have a question. In the memo, it talks about childcare facility, and my understanding was that we were still looking at the Children's Resource Center that has more than childcare facilities with the Performing Arts Center.
Thank you for that correction, Councillor Clayton. The intent was not to define what the facility would be. Certainly the intent at this time is just to have discussion around the site. I don't believe that there's any intent to define what it might contain other than childcare programs.
Thank you. Councillor Creasy.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I guess a couple of things. We've got a C4 group that's been formed. I guess I don't quite appreciate why that you need to be involved at this particular stage. I think that they're certainly driven enough to carry on negotiations if they're trying to report back to you, but I don't really know that this necessarily has to fall under your umbrella at this particular time. Is one. And the other one, as far as the negotiations being secretive, I can appreciate the whole legal and labor thing. I don't think that the whole premise of that is that we don't want the city to be paying an inflated price for property that is available to other purchasers, and I really don't foresee a situation where Wolf Creek School Division is going to be out flogging their property for sale to commercial vendors and that kind of thing. I just don't see the advantage of it or the need for it in this particular case.
Councillor Foster.
Sorry, perhaps respond.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Creasy. In regard to your first comments, the school division has indicated they will enter into negotiations with the city, not with the C4 committee. So this would be around land use. This would not, certainly my involvement would not be in regard to the actual facility development. It would simply be around the site and land use with the school division. And that's the insistence from the school division that the negotiations be directly with the city. And, you know, as far as the confidentiality aspect, again, that is a condition that they have requested, that the school division has requested, and the recommendation is that we would honor that should they wish to have those discussions in confidence.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I guess a question that I have is, did the city provide this land to the Wolf Creek School Division at the onset? I don't know if anybody can answer that, but was it not city land prior to becoming school land? I mean, I'm asking a very rhetorical question there. This is a collaborative effort. I think it just shows that we're all trying to make something work, and I think we're all coming to the table. So I really like the aspect, and I'm sure that discussions will be quite lengthy and quite a good process. So I'm certainly happy to make the recommendation if I might, and that's all. You want all three. The council enter into negotiations with Wolf Creek School Division and request that Wolf Creek School will develop a memorandum of understanding on how discussions will proceed, and that the City of Lacombe provides the C4 committee with a letter of intent to hold 1.04 acres in abeyance for a 2-year period, allowing for the necessary investigation and research into the feasibility of the performing arts and child care facility at this site. Now, do we want to change that, Odie, with your, or are you okay with that? Because I certainly,
the wrong idea.
yeah, I think we understand the intent for sure. And the council will appoint the CAO to represent the City of Lacombe in these negotiations with Wolf Creek School Division. Could I make a friendly amendment to that, or just a suggestion that we put, or representative? Or representative, you know, if Michael or Brandon has to go in your stead. Thank you.
Councillor Creasy.
Thank you. I guess the start there is we're asking for council to enter into negotiations. We're not actually there, so perhaps it should read the CAO or representative on behalf of the city enter negotiations with Wolf Creek School Division, and leave that last one off altogether. That just seems a little clearer to me, that's all.
Councillor Bosma.
If you want to clarify child care facility, what about child support facility? I mean, that covers a gamut of different. Family resource center, that would be better. Family resource center.
Mr. Miller? Doreen, you getting all this? Super. Any further discussion with regards to that? I too feel that we talk a lot, and we have right from October 2010, early 2011, with regards to strategic partnerships and working together with groups in our community. And the field house is one example. The skate park's another example. There's many examples of working together with community groups, and I think this is another one. This land's sat here for 100 years now, 111 years now, without being used. I think it'll be okay for the next 2 years. So I definitely support the initiative here and commend us for entering into these partnerships with these user groups. I think this is imperative for us to do, and not only with regards to recreation facilities, with garbage and with flooding issues, with all those types of issues that are all, they are all groups within our community that we have to work with to make Lacombe the best place to be. So, any Councillor Creasy.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor Christie, just so we don't offend some of our residents who live here. In fact, that land was used for many, many years as a mobile home park. So let's not.
Yeah, right. Sorry.
And just because I'm friends with someone that like to create some hard feelings, let's just not say that it wasn't used at all in the last 100 years, okay?
Yeah, it was baseball then. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? So carried. Thank you.
Mayor Christie,
yes.
Our last item regarding snow removal, there were 2 items and we didn't address the first one. Or were we supposed to? The proactive snow removal with the adjustment of the, that's just for information. Okay.
Thank you. Local improvement petition, CEO McCord.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Certainly Council was aware that a local improvement plan was presented to adjacent businesses to upgrade Len Thompson Drive to a paved standard from a current gravel standard. In response to this, there was a meeting held with landowners and administration to discuss the project and to discuss how we arrived at defined contribution levels. Subsequent to that, a petition was circulated and submitted to the city. That was received on March 28th. As CAO, I must declare that petition insufficient, and the petition is insufficient. There was a total of 9 petitioners. Of the 9 petitioners, 1 did not place the date beside their signature when they signed the petition, which nullifies that particular name on the petition in accordance with the Municipal Government Act. That means that a total of 8 out of 13 businesses were valid petitioners and signed the petition. It does not meet the 2/3 requirements in terms of the number of landowners impacted by this local improvement. Therefore, the petition is declared insufficient. However, it is certainly the recommendation of administration that we not proceed with this particular work this year, that there was sufficient opposition and significant opposition that would not be in the interests, certainly, of the city or the owners to agree to this level and then force that work upon those particular owners. So the recommendation is that we accept that the petition is insufficient and that we abandon the local improvement plan number 2013-02 for Len Thompson Drive. And of course that's from Wolf Creek Drive to the southern boundary of Len Thompson Drive.
Thank you. Councillor Kite?
I would like to make a motion that we accept the CAO declaration that the petition opposing local improvement plan number 2013-02 is insufficient and abandon local improvement plan number 2013-02 for Len Thompson Drive from Wolf Creek Drive to the southern boundary of Len Thompson Drive.
Thank you. Councillor Creasy, then Foster, and Councillor Busman.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Just so we're clear, are we to assume that the petition would be in fact valid if the date of the final signature was in place?
That is correct, Councillor Creasy. It would have in fact been a valid petition.
So they saw fit to sign their name to it. Yes, they should have put the date there. I mean, that's a pretty minuscule omittance in my opinion. Other than the risk of alienating a fairly large sector of our industrial group, I fail to see the benefit in ruling it this whatever the heck the term is.
Invalid.
Invalid, thank you. Insufficient, invalid, whatever. I really don't see the benefit of doing that at this point.
To Councillor Creasy, there are very strict and rigid legislation in the Municipal Government Act governing petitions, and it clearly states that petitioners must place the dates beside their name, their signature on any petition. Hence, we have no choice but to declare this petition insufficient in accordance with the legislation of the Municipal Government Act.
Okay, and because we in fact did receive it, we do have to rule it one way or another. I mean, if we're not going ahead with the plan anyway, what difference does it make? Is that why?
And that is correct, Councillor Creasy. I must make a declaration on any petition that is received. Yes.
Thank you for that clarification. And my final question is, what changed so significantly from our initial discussions where everything was going fine with this and was being well received? I don't understand where things went off the rails.
To Councillor Creasy, in response to that question, certainly we had a very good meeting between the administration and the landowners. We explained why there was zero contribution from the city at large towards this local improvement, and explained the process again in accordance with the legislation. There was no indication at that time that this local improvement would not go forward. So when the petition was presented, it was unexpected.
Okay, and would you mind reiterating why it was deemed that the city was not responsible for a portion of this particular road?
To Councillor Creasy, with a local improvement plan, it must be justifiable as to why the city would make a contribution towards that particular undertaking. In this instance, the benefiting properties were those adjacent to this roadway. There was no other benefiting. There wasn't an at-large benefit to the larger community. So taking this from a gravel standard to a paved standard provided direct benefit to those adjacent properties that were impacted. That is not a through road to other areas of the city. The only people utilizing that road are people accessing those businesses. Therefore, there was no contribution from the city at large towards this local improvement within the plan.
Okay, and because we're the developers of the property there, the gross property, how, I mean, if it was company ABC that was developing down the road further, they would have to pay for a portion of this road, would they not?
In terms of who we deem to be impacted by the local improvement, that is identified within the local improvement plan. So when we presented council with the local improvement plan, council reviewed that plan. At the time, administration identified the benefiting properties, which were the properties adjacent to this roadway. We could not justify a benefit to the larger community beyond those adjacent properties. That was the rationale behind who would pay for the local improvement.
No, I realize you said that once already, though. What I'm saying is, what about the development that we're doing beyond? I mean, it benefits those properties too, having a paved road in there.
When that area was developed, those lots were sold unserviced. So there was the payment wasn't done at that time, it wasn't charged for at that time, and at the other end, in our development, Glen Thompson Phase 2, we would pay for the paving as the developer of that property, taking off from where it leaves off when it comes to our property line on Glen Thompson Phase 2. So we were going to be paving that end as a developer of that end. As a developer of the first part, back in the day, 1993, 1992, 1991, whatever year it was, 1990, those lots were sold unserviced, unpaved, and yeah, it's the way it is. And we're playing catch up, basically.
No, and I think that's, from my recollection, that's precisely, that is accurate. I guess just one item that you might want to notice that I know when I brought property there was no difference in cost between lots directly accessed off of Wolf Creek Drive than what there was on Glen Thompson Drive. So I guess in effect, I didn't pay for asphalt either because I'm off of Wolf Creek Drive. So I mean, some pretty big inequities there, really. And I don't.
Councillor Creasy, I certainly appreciate your comments, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to address the standard that is in place today, regardless of the history.
Councillor Foster, then Councillor Busman.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. So, the motion's on the floor. As I understand it, price was a big piece of that discussion way back, so that's why it wasn't priced. Have the petitioners been notified?
Petitioners will be notified after council's decision this evening.
Okay, good. Thank you. I would like to make sure we did that, of course, and certainly we could defer proceeding with paving our next process for another year anyway, could it not? Our process?
To Councillor Foster, we will not pave Glen Thompson Phase 2 Industrial Park if the roadway leading to it is of a gravel standard. It will remain gravel as well.
Councillor Belsma?
Thanks, Mayor Christie. In terms of the discussion around the city paying or the residents, or not the residents, sorry, the business landowners paying. I'm certainly not in favor of our taxpayers in our entire community, and partly, of course, in our province, would be paying for the benefit of the landowners that will all of a sudden have their land values go up because there's now a paved road in front of their places. So I appreciate where we're headed with this, that we're just going to leave it as it is for the time being, and what would be the next step here? At what point would we even consider addressing this particular issue again?
Certainly, we'll not bring this back for another year, and prior to any further movements to pave this particular roadway, I would suggest there be a meeting with landowners so that there is a consensus before ever presenting a local improvement plan again.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I would just like to suggest that any, it's something going forward. I understand the implications of paving this and that those are the benefiting people. Those businesses will be the ones that stand to benefit the most. However, in the interest of compromise and so forth, then of course, we'll let it sit for a year. But I'm not adverse to doing some sort of cost share to get this done. I know it is precedent setting in a way, however, all new development is all undertaken by developers anyways. This is just, as the mayor alluded to, this is something that we need to clean up, and at some point this needs to get paved. I think there's got to be a compromise somewhere, but at any rate, maybe that's something for discussion a year down the road.
Thank you, Councillor Creasy.
Thank you. So that was actually alluded to in there, that this is precedent setting, and I appreciate the implications of that. What other areas are there in the city that this could potentially affect on the road?
To Councillor Creasy, I see our Infrastructure Services Director stepped out, but we have very few areas in the city that are still at a gravel standard. It's not that they're numerous and frequent. There may be other local improvements of a different nature. It certainly does not deal with just paved roadways.
Okay, thank you, because I can think of one actually, but I thought maybe there would be more. And while, like I said, I appreciate the idea of it being precedent setting, I would prefer that we came up with a creative solution to perhaps lower the burden on the landowners, and in the interest of having this done, because I don't think it's going to affect sales for us on our industrial property too. I think it would go a lot better if it was paved there. And as the mayor alluded to, that this was done a long time ago, perhaps wrongly, but we're kind of left with the bag now. And while property owners at that time may have entered into it in good faith, I think that a good portion of that property has changed hands and whatnot now, and it becomes a very muddy situation to try and I don't think it's going to be any easier to do this in a year. So I would like to see some negotiations happen whereby we can come up with a solution to make this happen and move on with selling the city's industrial lots there as well.
It's going to be a whole lot more complicated because there's a section that heads to the east as well. I've been getting my east and west mixed up today, but yes, it is a convoluted situation. It is, there's only one other area, but local improvements don't only pertain to paving. I tend to agree with you, but we cannot, due to the MGA, to the rules with regards to bringing this forward as a local improvement, we have to wait 1 year, a period of 12 months, before we can reintroduce that same project for that. And yes, I agree that we will be much more prepared and much more homework done prior to that, because it has been approached at least one other time in the past. So thank you for that.
But there's nothing in the NJ that says that we cannot still negotiate with the landowners, so that this is a little more positive in the future, is it?
Absolutely.
Because it's not going to happen overnight, so I would like to see it continue on, so that when 1 year is up to make it all legal, we can actually move ahead and make something happen. Absolutely. That was all I was getting at.
Absolutely. Director Mitchell.
So, just for clarification, there are 1, 2, 3 other places in town that don't have paving. paving right now, one's residential, two are industrial. But probably the other bigger issue, of course, is sidewalk. There's lots of streets in town with only one side of sidewalk, and lots of the older parts of it too, so you can make that argument that we're down the road with doubling the sidewalks. I guess the question, we don't know exactly why the owners petitioned this out, and I guess that's a conversation we need to have. Unfortunately for the owners, their only obligation, or their only ability to change this was to petition this out. They can't, once it's issued, you can't renegotiate, you can't change the plan. So it's unfortunate. It is rigid as it is because it is a special tax, and it does bound the property, not the owners, but the property for a lengthy period of time. And so it is a fairly rigid set of rules. In terms of the petition, Norm is right. You can't. There is no discretion. I've been through a few of these.